Back on the record. I think we are with our district attorney. Thank you so much.
Morning. Are you ready for me to go ahead and start?
Please.
Dan May with the DA's office. Sorry I wasn't here a little bit earlier. I've actually had a medical appointment with my wife this morning, so helping her out. I'm going to go through a little bit about the DA's office. For some of you, you've seen the first part of this presentation before. For some of you, it'll be brand new, and since I've got kind of a mixed audience, we'll go through a little bit about the DA's office, and we'll also go through our budget a little bit. Now, do I control this with, okay. I can just go right to there. This is our actual mission for the 4th Judicial District Attorney's Office. It is one that we developed particularly to our office, and you do have different mission statements by different offices even across the state, much less across the country. Our office's #1 job is to administer justice, advocate for victims, and partner with law enforcement and citizens of this community in the deterrence and prevention of crime. When we go through that, justice is really what we do. A lot of people don't understand what the DA's office is or how we interact. When we step into the courtroom, we actually represent the people of the state of Colorado. That includes the defendant, that includes the victims, that includes the citizenry, that includes law enforcement. In any given case, somebody's probably not happy with us. Generally, it can be the defendant, but there are certain cases where a victim has greater expectations than what we think is just in the case. There are certain times we aren't in lockstep with law enforcement, that they may disagree with decisions we make, and sometimes it may be the citizenry if we think that's where justice takes us. We are the only ones who can step into the courtroom and charge somebody. So we can say we want to charge this person with domestic violence, murder, robbery. Nobody else in the courtroom has that power. As we walk into the courtroom, we're the only ones who can read the file and say, I think this person's innocent. And we're the only ones who can dismiss the case under those circumstances. Defense attorney can't, judge can't. So doing justice is very important, and actually there's a lot of power that are given to my deputy DAs. And so part of that is teaching them the right use of that power to do justice, to realize that convicting the person of the crime and going for a maximum sentence is just as much justice as dismissing the case because you didn't think the person did the crime. Each of those are equally important. Quite frankly, a lot of our cases end up somewhere in between. You know, you do have, burglary is a good example where you can have a home invasion where strangers go in and pistol whip people, maybe rape somebody. In that case, my people ought to be saying justice is the maximum penalty. At the same time, you can have your neighbor kid who opens up the front, you've got your screen door there without a lock on it. They walk in and they steal change out of your, that jar that you throw all your change in. Well, justice there is probably a second opportunity, doing rehabilitation, trying to give them a clean record so they can get jobs someday, but still have an accountability. So that's why I say you find a lot of cases fall in between those parameters. That's where we advocate for victims. We partner with law enforcement, but again, like I say, we're not necessarily in lockstep with them. We do a lot of crime prevention and deterrence programs in our office. And you'll see as I go through this presentation, we have more problem-solving courts than any DA's office in the state of Colorado, and probably rank right up there nationally, although I haven't necessarily seen numbers on that. The Office of the District Attorney is governed by the Constitution. It's established, and then if you ever want to look at our statutory sections, you can see that. One thing, for instance, it says in there that my deputy DAs have all the power of the district attorney when they walk into the courtroom. That's one of the powers that it gives. For those who are kind of history buffs, when we go back to the forming of the state, there were only 4 judicial districts to begin with, and you can see our judicial district went from almost one end of the state to the other, if you see the sort of shaded top one on the left up there. We went out to Kansas and all the way out, almost out to Utah in terms of the 4th Judicial District. It does take a constitutional amendment to change a judicial district. Today we have, you can see at one point, it wasn't that long ago, we went from Teller to the Kansas border. It wasn't that long ago, actually, when Adolph Coors was kidnapped and his body was found in Douglas County. At that time, Douglas County was part of the 4th Judicial District. They have a famous picture, and it's the DA from the 4th Judicial is standing near where his body was found. Today, there are 22 judicial districts. We are the 4th, which is now El Paso and Teller. DA's offices range anywhere from a single county, which is what Pueblo is, if you see there, the 10th, on up to 7 counties, which is what the 13th is there in the, I guess it'd be the northeast corner of the state. The Denver's a single. Jefferson County is very similar to us, but you see the different sizes. There has been a discussion of breaking up the 18th because Douglas County has grown so much. And actually about a decade ago, they were actually moving towards putting on a constitutional amendment to divide Arapahoe from Douglas County. They haven't accomplished that. That may be something you'll see in the future. Part of it was Elbert and Lincoln worried about where they would go and who they would be with out there. But that's the only sort of movement in terms of that. It does mean that if I go back east, they have a system where the Attorney General regulates all the DAs in the state. So policy is set in their state capital and everybody kind of follows that. As you go west, we have more judicial districts like this where the DA is independently elected. I do not serve under the Attorney General. We set up our local policies for what we think is appropriate in our area, which then allows that you may have a different kind of DA elected in Lamar, Colorado, or Boulder, Colorado, or El Paso, Colorado, in terms of our philosophies, in terms of our emphasis on things. And so it really allows for local control of the DA's office and sort of that image of what locals want out of their district attorney. Quite frankly, I find there are some differences when I go up to Teller County. They have some different areas they want us to emphasize in our prosecutions than what I may have down here. Sometimes I have some that are very similar. Right now, they're being overrun with heroin and methamphetamine, just like we are down here, and they're asking us to take a tough stand on that. Quite frankly, down here, if I get someone with a 4-inch knife concealed, that's illegal, and my Colorado Springs Police Department wants me to prosecute that. If I go into Teller County, I may be talking to a mayor of any one of the cities that has a 4-inch knife in their pocket. Sometimes it's just a different philosophy. As I say, we cover El Paso and Teller. We actually, and I'll list here in a minute, we have 22 different law enforcement agencies that bring cases to us. Typically, we are not the investigators on a case. Law enforcement agency does the investigation. They bring the reports to us. We then review those. We can either, at that point, say we're not going to file charges. Either we can't prove this case beyond a reasonable doubt, or we think the person's innocent. Or we can say you need to do more investigation on this before we'll accept it, or we can say we will file charges. But we are generally not the originating agency. There are certain crimes like election law that the DA or the Attorney General are required to do the investigation, but there aren't many that fall into that category. We currently have 79 attorneys. I'm the largest law firm in the Pikes Peak region. There's nobody that has an office of that size in the Pikes Peak region. We have 22 sworn investigators and another staff of 119. We also have volunteers, which you'll see when we get to our budget. That's one way we're able to work on a smaller budget. We have about 125 volunteers at any given time. I will say my investigators do some original investigations, or we may investigate other agencies. Generally what they're doing, though, is preparing cases for trial. Is primarily what my investigators are doing. We have 17 district court judges. That's where our felony cases are. We have 11 county court judges, which is where we have our misdemeanor traffic. In years when they expand that, sometimes I come in here and I'll be saying, if they open a new courtroom, I've got to have the attorneys to man the courtroom. Typically in our district court, it takes 2 attorneys to man a courtroom. In our county courts, it takes 1 attorney. I'm not seeing future expansion right now. Typically, the 4th Judicial District doesn't have as many, we typically have more cases per judge than other judicial districts. So when they look at expansion, they'll sometimes look down here, but that isn't the case that I'm seeing here in the near future. We have 4 juvenile divisions, which again, we man with 1 attorney usually per courtroom in there. And then we have our specialty courts, drug court, DUI court, DV court, HEALS court, veterans court. Typically, my people in the district courts will have their district court and will also go over to one of these specialty courts. I do have Judy Haller who oversees our specialty courts at this point. And again, we have more of those. We really do have a philosophy in our office of giving a second chance. First time you've done something, we'll try to get it off your record. We'll try to get you into a specialty court. We'll really look at rehabilitation. You want to keep repeating it, we file more habitual criminal charges than anybody in the state, and we get more habitual criminal convictions than anybody in the state. So I have the largest diversion programs, but I also have the largest habitual conviction programs. So that's sort of our philosophy when you become the problem. By the way, that will be significant. I think Pete Lee and his committee are this year going to introduce taking away habitual criminals and mandatory sentencing. Quite frankly, our habitual criminal law has been watered down for some years. You've heard the 3 strikes and out. When I first started, if you had 3 prior felonies and got a 4th, it was a life sentence. If you had 2 felonies in 10 years and got a 3rd, it was 25 to 50. Today, we make it proportional in Colorado. We actually addressed this well over a decade ago, probably 15 years ago, to where now it multiplies. So if you have a class 6 felony where the maximum may be a couple of years, if you have your 4th felony, well, 3 times that, so or 4 times that, depending on the situation. So you'd be looking at 8 years or 6 years instead of 2. If you do a more serious felony, then it gets to be bigger numbers. If you remember our looters, when they were looting up in the Waldo Canyon, both of them were habitual offenders. One of them got 72 years, the other got 48 years. You might ask, did that have a deterrent effect? Those sentences were handed down about 30 days before the Black Forest fire. If I go into Waldo Canyon, we probably had 30 to 50 homes looted. Black Forest was actually a larger area to try to protect. It actually had a number of homes and was much more difficult to protect. Those 2 people got their sentences 30 days before. If we had 2 homes looted, that would be a lot in Black Forest. It had a huge deterrent effect. John Suthers, at the time as the Attorney General, was concerned about looting. They had some floods up around Fort Collins at the time, and he was openly saying, you want to do that here, just remember in the Springs, they got 72 years. They had very little looting up there. So sometimes it is important on these cases, and it does have a public safety. My concern is if we water down our habituals once more, we're going to lose that deterrent effect. I know in particular they've talked about, and you'll be active in these roles talking to our legislatures, I've seen Pete Lee had a quote saying that in particular he was concerned about the low-level crimes. Well, I got to tell you, identity theft is one of those low-level crimes that doesn't get a big sentence, and it can have a huge impact on the life of an individual. It can destroy their life for many years. And if I haven't got the ability to get larger than a 4-year sentence on it, because on 4 years, they're eligible for ComCore, they immediately go to DOC. DOC is going to calculate their time by 1/2, saying, okay, you're actually going to only serve 2 years with us instead of 4 because of good time and earned time. They immediately are eligible then for a halfway house, which is ComCore. When you're within 20 months or 2 years of your out date, you're eligible for ComCore. You go to ComCore, they hold you there 180 days in residency, and then you're back in your house. And if that's all I can do to an identity theft person, they're right back in business. So if it's someone who's on their 4th, 5th, 6th felony, I've got to have something that deters them because clearly it didn't work the first time, it didn't work the second. They've probably been through a diversion program, but they've probably been through probation then, and now we're up to your 5th felony and you're destroying people's lives and you're facing the same sentence you did before. That's my concern if we water this down too much. These are our partner agencies that will bring cases to us. It's both local and federal and military. We actually work very closely with our military. When a soldier does something off base, we'll discuss it with the military. We both have jurisdictions and we'll prosecute where we think it's most appropriate between the discussions we have, let's say with Fort Carson or the Air Force Academy or Pete Field or any one of our military installations. We have a number of federal and local task force that we are part of, and they'll bring their cases to us. We actually do a lot of wiretaps for the federal government on those task force because we can get them done faster. It takes weeks and weeks to get them done through the U.S. Attorney's Office. We can get them through the courts much quicker. And those are cases that are impacting our area. A lot of those are narcotics, but there can be other. We've had human trafficking now has been added to the ability to do wiretaps and things like that. We've actually had some cold case murder cases that we've also used wiretaps on to solve. This is the, again, kind of looking through, we have a number of specialty divisions in our office. SVU is our sex crimes unit, primarily sexual assault on kids. It's also adult rapes. We also have in there child abuse and some of our elderly fraud. Our economic crime division handles the complex embezzlements. Our felony intake is where the police come to file all their felony cases. That's where sort of the negotiations on cases sometimes happens. Investigations we've talked about. Victim witness is one, I got to tell you, this is one that's an unfunded mandate. For those of you who may be on CCI, that law gets changed almost every single year. When we first had our victims' rights, which is important that we recognized, I'll say 2 decades ago for the first time in our Constitution that victims have rights also. Up to that point, it was only defendants. We had 2 people in our office handling sort of the victims' rights issue. Today, I'm not sure, do you know the exact number, but it's a huge department. I'll say 15, 16 people, 17 people. And every year since they passed that amendment, I get a new change on the law. When they do a new change, I have to throw out all the paperwork that we gave the victims before and re-put in whatever the new thing is. So there's sort of that paper cost and operation costs, and I have to hire more people to cover the new rights. And it's grown and grown and grown. Theoretically, we could offset that against some victim comp money we get to help run some programs. Doesn't come close to covering the costs anymore. It is one that I think if I've proposed, and actually CDAC has come out and said, if you're going to do a new victims' rights law, there needs to be money with it to pay for the local impact of that law. We have taken that position, but we haven't been able to get the legislature to do that to date. There are some ways that would do it that would not really cost the taxpayers money, but they've just refused to do that. So I'll just throw out there, every year, I'm sure this year I'm going to get more legislation on changing our victims' rights law. Sometimes for legislature, it just shows something, they're nice for victims. Sometimes it has a bigger impact and it is very important. It does require manpower. Quite frankly, on some of the victims' things, like our victims' compensation, those are run locally. Quite frankly, I don't see why those can't be run statewide. Why a statewide agency couldn't pick up those positions and run it on a statewide basis rather than making us at the local level pay for all the new things that they want to do. That's one that you get there. It's an important unit and it does provide a lot of services. Diversion, I think you're generally familiar with our diversion. We have more diversion people than anywhere. Our juvenile was our initial. We were the first in the entire country to have juvenile diversion. And literally what we do, with about 1 out of every 4 kids that are charged with a crime, we meet them at the front door of the courthouse there going into the courtroom. And we say, you can go in and you can have this decided by a judge, or we'll dismiss your case today. You're going to come over to our office. You'll sign a contract. You'll admit what you did. You will agree to pay restitution, and we make them get a job. We don't let their parents do it because the whole thing is that accountability piece. We make them do something back for the community because they need to understand there was a community impact. Their parents have to be there with them and sign the contract. They may have to do something back within the family even itself, depending on what it takes to make them whole. Kids who go through that, it's something like 84, 85% we never see back in the system again. Highly successful. I went up and Mitch Morrissey at the time was the DA in Denver. He was testifying a few years ago in front of the legislature and told him he had the largest juvenile diversion program in the state of Colorado and said he had about 250 kids in it. At that time, we were running between 750 and 1,000 kids. So I pulled him aside and said, Mitch, I'm not going to say anything on the record here, but actually you're not the largest. So that's why I say we really believe in giving second chances. The neighborhood justice is unique to us. I don't think anybody else in the state has it. It's a mediation team where my attorneys may see a case that they think, we can prosecute going back and forth, but it's not going to solve, let's say, a neighborhood issue where one neighbor's dog runs across somebody's lawn and they want him charged for a dog at large. So the next neighbor's kid runs over their mailbox, and I can prosecute each one of these little cases as they escalate and not solve the issue. We can send it to mediation. It's highly successful. And in fact, now anybody who wants to get a restraining order, non-domestic violence, the courts require they go through our mediation program, and over 90% of them never ask for the restraining order. So it saves taxpayers dollars, quite frankly, in the end, and it solves problems. Our Veterans Court, I think you're aware of. Our Veterans Court was the first in Colorado, not the first in the nation. It was the first in the nation to allow felons, and it was the first in the nation to allow domestic violence. In fact, at the time, then U.S. Senator, who was our Kerry, had in the bill that if you had domestic violence, you could not get federal funding for your Veterans Court. We talked with Tessa, we worked out what we thought was an appropriate way to handle some cases, and we did domestic violence in there. We were the first in the country, and we just didn't take the federal money. You find the people that are in there, the judge has his regular docket and volunteers his time to this. Public defender has their regular docket, volunteers their time to this. Same thing in my office. They have their regular duties and they volunteer their time because it's an important thing. Our Veterans Court, actually, they came out with a study of veterans courts across the country, and guess what? Ours was ranked as the riskiest veterans court in the country. At the same time, we had the lowest recidivism rate of any veterans court in the country. And really, that's the volunteers beyond what I just talked about, we have a lot of citizens that come forward and realize how important this court is to people and how freedom is not free and they want to give back. It has been designated now as one of the top 5 problem-solving courts, no matter what type, mental health, drug, whatever, in the entire country. And so people now come out and study it to figure out how they can replicate that in other courts across the country. As we mentioned, our felony courts are in district court, county's misdemeanor. Juvenile, it doesn't matter, any type crime goes into juvenile court, except traffic. They end up, if you're 17-year-old and you got traffic tickets, you're gonna end up in my county court. We handle 30 to 35,000 cases a year. A lot of people don't realize how big our office is. We have some other initiatives, not one more. Remember in 2010, 2011, we had a record number of baby deaths. We had 10 of them. We formed the Not One More group, and that number has just dropped substantially every single year since. It's been extremely effective. It's really in the hospitals and the military. It's a lot of in our faith-based community. It's had a huge impact, and it's a deterrent. It's an example of deterrence that we do rather than prosecution when we can. Human trafficking, we actually started a human trafficking diversion program. I think we've had 22 people go through it. Now, one of them has gotten back in the streets that we know of to date. We've had a prescription drug program. We know about the opioid issues. Some of those start by prescription drugs. So we've had a diversion program. Don't know that I have numbers for you to tell you recidivism. STOP program. My legislature decriminalized theft, and our thefts have gone through the roof across Colorado since they've done that. Our STOP program is sort of the opposite, where we allow the different agencies with CSPD, they have a number of different buildings that they're at, and each one of their sections can designate up to 3 sort of habitual theft people that they really want us to go after for that division or that particular department. So that one, we're actually doing the opposite, where we're spotting the person who's really causing the problem. Again, it's an area that people react to what the legislature does. It's more organized than you think. A few years ago, we had a major fencing operation over on Platte Avenue where they'd steal a Target, let's say, bring it over to them to sell it. They get and he would give them, so much on the dollar for whatever items they bring over. He was then turning around and selling them on the internet. When we shut him down, that weekend, I think there were 3 thefts in the entire city just by shutting down that fence. They're organized, they know what's going on, they know where the crimes are more emphasized or where you can get higher penalties, and they stay away from those. When they decriminalized my theft and decriminalized auto theft is the largest growing crime in the state of Colorado over the last few years. So those things do have an impact. This is just an idea of my office. Let's see, I think I do. Does this thing have if you look, I don't know if you can see it, basically everything, well, the column on the, as you're facing it, the left side there is my county courts, that's misdemeanor and traffic, where they will handle about 25,000 cases this year. Generally, top charge being drunk driving on the traffic side, domestic violence, and then that's a lot of our animal abuse cases. Big portion of the next center area is where we put most of our emphasis, which is our district court. That's our felony cases, everything from burglary to murders to identity theft to whatever. In the middle is my investigations division. Then we have our, you can see our intake unit and records. Teller County is down below. When I first started, Teller County was part-time. We'd send an attorney up half a day each week to cover the docket. When gaming came in, it became full-time. There are a lot of benefits to gaming if you've seen Teller County, but at the same time, we now have 2 full-time attorneys up there and a staff to match that. Economic crime is over next to that. Then we have the SVU. That's where we put a real emphasis. If you're going to abuse one of our kids, we're going to take a tough line on that. Probably 1 out of 4, 1 out of every 5 of our trials is out of that unit. It's a very hardworking unit, experienced attorneys, and they're there to hold people accountable for some of the worst crimes in our community. The juvenile section, you can see they actually handle probably about 2,000 cases a year. It's been up to 3,000. Then you see some of our diversion, restitution. Now, if you look at the bottom on the right, that's my victims unit, so I guess you can count the numbers, that we've gone from 2 to where we are today with all the unfunded mandates the state gives us. Computer services has become a huge deal. That's how we get out all our discovery and everything these days. Admin, you can see, is at the very top, kind of a small area, so we really do emphasize putting people in the courts and handling the cases. Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Littleton.
Commissioner Littleton.
Thank you. I know you're pointing to it with the thing, but if you could use the mouse to actually scroll over the screen so we can see where you're pointing, that would be helpful.
Okay, okay. Well, there's our admin.
Thank you.
So if you want to know where we really do emphasize, we don't have a lot of money towards administration, if that makes sense. And actually, my management team, for instance, if you look at we work on teams in district court. Sam Burney here would be the team leader with a series of attorneys under her, but that makes up my homicide team. So when you see people going into murder trials, that's my team leaders. And then they're also going to be training and doing trials with the people with them. So again, when you hear about, sort of our management heads, we really are in the courtrooms and things. Okay. Oops, and I just hit a button I wasn't supposed to hit. Okay. Here's one that you can brag about to the other commissioners around the state. We are easily one of the 5 largest DA's offices in the state of Colorado. Of the 22, they kind of break down. Quite frankly, Adams County is kind of a tweener there as you look at it. But El Paso, Denver, Arapahoe, and Jefferson are generally fairly comparable. You can see we have the highest felony load in the state of Colorado. We filed 6,500 felonies last year. Denver was second at 5,700. Someone was talking to me about, we were actually comparing our pretrial services, for instance, the other day, and they were saying, well, Arapahoe has a lot more money in their pretrial services. And I said, yeah, and actually they have 2,000 fewer felony cases than we have. So there's 2,000 fewer felons that they're booking through their jail or holding them in jail pretrial or whatever it may be. Part of that, quite frankly, we do have a low crime rate here. We have a high solve rate. We have very good law enforcement agencies, very well trained, very well educated, and we have a high solve rate. So I'm not necessarily driven by the crime rate as much as I'm driven by the solve rate. They solve the case, then I get it. I do like to tell you that when you get have you had the presentation from the sheriff?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay, his people pick him up. They solved the crime. The burglary happened last night. They picked him up. We put them away. We file the charges. We handle the case over a homicide case will take a year or 2 for us to handle it. They'll have it for several days or maybe up to a couple weeks, and we take it from there, and it's really our case to handle after that. So if you're looking at public safety, we have a huge impact on public safety. If we haven't got the manpower to put people away or to do our diversion programs or impact this community, has an huge impact beyond just picking them up that night and letting them go. You can see our juvenile numbers and our traffic. Denver, you'll see stars there. That's because it's city and county of Denver, and they actually throw all of their traffic and misdemeanor cases over to city court rather than their DA's office. So they don't have to have that in their DA's office. And even then, you can see their budget. My budget last year was $12,887,000. Denver's was $22 million, and you can see the caseload differences. You can see the 18th was $20 million. Jefferson County was $22 million. Adams, which I say again is kind of a tweener really when you look at the numbers, was $17 million. So we are extremely efficient. We run some excellent diversion programs. We actually will compete with Denver for the most males in prison, if you will, when I look at the prison numbers. Actually, females, we are clearly #1 in the state for how many women are in prison from El Paso County. 20% of the women down there are from El Paso County. The next highest is 12%. I did see a statistic that 88% of the women in prison now are in gangs. That kind of surprised me. I didn't realize how gang-oriented that is. In terms of how we handle things. So we handle a lot of cases and we do them very well. This is your 10 county, which we put up there. If you want to look at that, I can hold it a second. Do you have it just electronically or do you have it in paper form?
Yep,
I really think the more comparable those, the top 5. Pueblo's is, I don't know, I'm 79 attorneys. Pueblo's going to be maybe 27 attorneys or something like that. I mean, they really aren't very comparable. Mesa County is going to be a small office. Weld County, I mean, those others are pretty small offices. Even Boulder's probably in the 20s up there in terms of that. Now, Arapahoe Douglas is together up there, and that's why we combined their 2 budgets. Here's what we handled last year, 32,500 cases. We collected over $5 million in restitution, which we typically lead the state or in the top couple in the state. Victims comp program, if people are injured or let's say even a burglary, if you break your front door, you can come in and get your locks replaced for free or some of your injuries paid for. That is not tax dollars. Every defendant who goes through the system from traffic on up has to pay into a victims comp fund. We raise, you can see easily hundreds of thousands of dollars each year, and that money goes back to victims. Now, there's actually an independent board that makes the determinations of paying that out. We had 25 homicides in 2016. You've seen we already have 23 to date. We've been overwhelmed by major cases, quite frankly, in the last 2 years. And we've had a lot in our juvenile area. By the way, they decriminalized the juvenile area over the last few years, and I'm seeing a rise in violent crime. They took away my ability to do direct files. They destroyed the YOS program, which is a fabulous program for violent juveniles down in Pueblo. It's now for 20-year-olds, essentially. It used to be for 16-year-olds, and it got them out of gangs, and I saw less violent crime in my juveniles, and quite frankly, I saw less violent crimes by my 20-year-olds because they had gone through that system. We have decriminalized that, and across the state, by the way, across the state, we have an increase of 20% of felonies across the state of Colorado. That includes us. Over the last 3 years, I believe the number is between 35 and 43%. Felonies have increased across the state of Colorado. And we started this decriminalization about 3 years ago for theft, drugs, juveniles, armed robberies, escapes, things like that. And they have more that they want to, that is being proposed this year. We had only 3 homicide trials last year. Some of that can be how the judges' dockets go, but we've done 10 so far this year. We usually average about a dozen, one a month in our murder trials. We did 196 felony cases were trialed in 2016. I know I haven't seen the number in Arapahoe in a while, but Kim will talk to their assistant DA. I'm not sure they're breaking 100 felony trials to give you a comparison up there. So we emphasize if you're not taking cases to trial 196 out of 6,000, then you're not, you're plea bargaining. You're not coming from a very strong position of plea bargaining. It's important to pick the right cases and say, you do a murder in El Paso County, we're going to go for the max. And it does have an impact on deterrence. We do more than anybody else in the state. And you can see the trial numbers already this year. We have 178 already this year. We'll probably make 200 felony trials, while the rest of the state is maybe pushing 100 of the other major offices. Here it is, 36%. Over the last 3 years, our felony filings are up. Across the state, we're up 41% here in El Paso County. We're now trying to study that. We have a lot of things going on. They've had some real parole reform. So we're trying to see how many of these new cases may be people on parole. We have a lot of new bond reform. I know you're looking at pretrial services. I think it's important we put in the right type pretrial services. A lot of people are pushing Mesa County. I think I saw the number the other day that in 2015, Mesa County, 14% of their cases were people on bond. Today it's 24%. So you got to ask, are they really providing public safety when you have an increase like that? But that's something we're studying across the state, is this people on bond. Can't tell you if we'll be able to study how much may be related to marijuana. But we're going to look at the type crimes. Are these violent crimes, drug crimes, theft crimes, and then maybe tie it back to what the legislature's been doing. So that's what we're studying. We right now know we have the increase. Now the question is why. We are seeing, by the way, you saw the city got their amendment. I'm anticipating I'm going to get more cases as they put more cops in the street. They solve more crimes. I'm not going to be asking for personnel this year, but it will probably be a future thing as those, it takes some time to put them through the rookie schools, usually takes about 10 months. As they get that increase on the streets next year, it's going to start overwhelming my office. You'll hear my big issue today will be salary equity and adjustments. I've talked to some of you personally about that, and some of you have heard that in the past. That affects my turnover. It affects my ability to keep good investigators and to keep good attorneys. I've got to have top attorneys to take on top attorneys across this country, quite frankly. When I get behind, I have a hard time retaining people. Part of mine is just competing within the county. You guys have had a salary survey I'll be talking about. To me, that's one thing of just making it fair through the county. I can compare my investigators to the rookies, the people who can't even get on the street now at the sheriff's office and see we're coming in at equal pay, and my people average 22 years of experience, and say something's not right within the county. I can look at my paralegals. I can look at at one point, our receptionists, and just say, I'm not asking to be like the city or like Denver or like Arapahoe. I just want to be like the other agencies in the county. If I can get up to that, that's just fair in the county, and it helps me retain good people. This we put in here, I want you to know we have an outstanding DA's office. If you can go down those awards. Some of those are just this year. We emphasize a lot of training. When I first came in, we had some training, but not a lot in the DA's office. We really emphasize that. If you see, Jeff Lindsay was named the Trainer of the Year for the entire state of Colorado for prosecutors. Diana Colon was named the Victim Advocate of the Year for the entire state of Colorado. Vicki up there just got DV Summit, the Portia Light Award amongst all the victim advocates. That's within the Victim Advocate organization, not the prosecution. Robin Shaw, we eliminated an investigator position and brought in an accountant to be able to do our economic crime cases, and she's been awarded by the state nationally. Michelle Nelson was previously awarded as the top administrator in the state of Colorado. You can see as you go down that list, we've had a number of attorneys. That again is the statewide prosecution group naming one attorney as the outstanding attorney in the entire state of Colorado. We've had a number of those. Gwen Stein, as I get down to the bottom there, won the Kaleidoscope Award that goes to the top volunteer program head. She actually trains a lot of your other volunteer programs, how to set them up in offices, and it really is fabulous. But we really do have an outstanding office, and it's recognized. Here's my budget from you. Let's see, this is the last year's budget? That's this year. That's what we're requesting. This is what we're requesting this year. You can see 95% of my budget is people. That's really where we emphasize it, and there's 4% in our operating. Critical needs. Again, I'm going to come back to salary is the #1 thing that affects my office. Part of that that's 95% of my budget. We did and I want you to know the salary items I'm asking for are not new in the budget process. We started a program in 2016. Commissioner Glenn and Commissioner Littleton were here. We first looked at, they looked at a 5-year plan to what they called to the midpoint at that time 2 years ago, which is not the midpoint anymore, but that's not necessarily my concern, to look at every single position in the county. And they actually give me a list. And they give me everybody's name on the list, and I can see exactly where everybody is on that midpoint. It is a way for me to be fair within the county, because they're picking, what they do is they look at clerk's office, sheriff's office, my office. They rank your positions and they give it a number based on its discretion and what the job does, and want to compare across whether it's Department of Transportation. And then they say, okay, for someone who is a number 9 here, this is what their payout to be. If they're a 17, this is what their payout to be. If they're 24. And it's a way to then make fairness within the county. 2016, they had what they said was the minimum pay for those ranges. And then after that, they had a 5-year plan set out for 17, 18, 19, 20 to take everybody to the midpoint so everybody's pay would be equal across the county. Shock of shocks, I got more minimum pay the first year they did minimum than anybody in the county, because that's how far behind we were. 17, we sort of stayed on that, but you did a pay for performance. When you do a pay for performance, what happens is if I've got an employee making $100 and someone else has an employee in that same position at $200, if you give them both 2%, mine went up to 102, theirs went up to 204, and we just widened the gap of the equity within the county. So part of mine is that it is important to have pay per performance. It is important to have an incentive program, and I think that's important, and I use it very much in my office. At the same time, if I don't have a program that looks at the equity, which is what the other survey is, then I'll never have equity within the county. So that's one that we are asking for to look at that. On average, my office is 13.1% below the midpoint. That's one of the top 2 offices within the county. I have people that are at 25% below the midpoint. Again, if you look at the roadmap, if you stay on the roadmap that's already been, this isn't something new, or isn't switching tax dollars or switching out what you promised your constituents. It's been on the roadmap for a couple of years. If you follow the next step in the roadmap, for just the first step towards midpoint, again, it affects more employees in my office, or the money amounts greater than anywhere else in the county. And that's because we're the furthest behind just comparing within the county. That affects my ability to retain good people, even competing within the county. It's tough when I'm competing with other county offices for those positions. It's tough, much less, when I'm competing with other DA's offices or the market. So that's why, for me, the #1 issue is that. Quite frankly, I know that I'm going, initially I was also looking at personnel needs. We do have needs now. You've seen we've had a lot of huge cases. It's a huge resource drain when I have major cases, but this can wait. This can wait till next year. I know my law enforcement agencies are gearing up. I do have personnel needs. And if you looked at Commissioner Littleton and Commissioner Glenn have seen my presentations before. We've had positions like that up there. So I don't want you someday to say, wow, Dan, we never heard of this before. I can say, no, we've had these positions up for a couple of years. There are needs in that, but if I can retain people, that's my biggest need right now. Our turnover this year in 2017 amongst my investigators was 36%. 1 out of every 3 of my investigators left the office this year. Amongst my attorneys, it was 21.52%. I'll tell you, in 2016, when we did the minimum money and people saw kind of a light at the end of the tunnel, my attorney was 12%, and my investigator was 4%. When in 17, they didn't follow up on the midpoint, even though it was on the chart, they didn't follow it that year, they went pay per performance. A lot of my people noticed that and said, well, where's the light at the end of the tunnel? And I lost a lot of people in 2017. I'm hoping that we can get back to that. I will tell you again, I think pay per performance is important. In my office, our staff, typically what we do is what you provide us in money, we're going to provide that to staff. It's sort of the cost of living, keeps them equal to others in the county, and so we try to do that. My attorneys are strictly pay per performance. We do an evaluation each year. They're first, second, third, fourth, fifth year attorney. We have an expectation of how they ought to be performing, and so we tell them, here's what your expected pay could be. But if you're doing better than that, then we're going to give you more. If you're doing worse than that, we're going to give you less. They really are in a pay per performance, so that's why that money is important too. And you know, 79 out of my 225 employees are attorneys, so they are strictly on that program. That doesn't mean others aren't awarded also in our office, but it is more dependent sort of on what you give in terms of what we do with the rest of the office. I don't know if I need to get into specifics. I guess I can, because we pulled some numbers of what we've seen, what we pay our victim advocate, and what we've seen the advertisement from the sheriff's office is substantially greater than what we pay our top victim advocate. Like I said, I can look at my post-certified deputy at the sheriff's office making substantially more than my investigators. Comparing paralegals, it's sort of across the board, and that's why we're hoping that as you look at the pay issues, that there is some money that is put towards the equity issue also. Any questions?
Commissioner Waller.
Thank you, Mr. President. And, you know, Mr. DA, I understand you have a lot of employees that aren't attorneys, but I'd like to talk about those for just a minute here and kind of tease out some of the numbers on, you know, what young attorneys are facing coming out of law school today. First of all, can you tell us, I don't know if you have the data with you, but what's the average caseload for your kind of line DAs in county and district courts?
Oh, you can tell, I'd have to say off the top of my head, take 24,000 divided by 14, and that's my county court caseload. which ranks pretty high across the state. I would guess my district court, we were running about 230 or something, but that's off the top, 250 per attorney in my district court.
That's 250 per year?
Per year.
And so that's, you know, an average of what, probably 24, 25 at any given time, cases that they have open?
Oh, they got more cases than that open.
A lot more
Yeah, they
cases
go
than
in on
that
a
open at any
docket. They're
given
going to
time.
have, I don't know, an average docket's going to be 6 pages, good 10 per page. I mean, yeah.
I mean, so but the point is,
They're going over, they used to see, you'd watch them roll over with the boxes of files, and the 3 boxes of files was not unusual on a routine docket. Anymore, we're going over with computers now more and more, so that you're not seeing that visual because it's in their computer.
but the point is, they have a significant number of cases at any given time in, you know, cases that range from lower level felonies all the way up to murder. I mean, we're talking serious, a serious amount of responsibility, right?
Absolutely.
And so also, one of the things I've been trying to understand here, you know, I know these young attorneys come to the table, come to the DA's office, and you know, they don't have the same kind of school debt that, you know, say an investigator has, or you know, somebody just graduating with a bachelor's degree or even a master's degree. Do you know what the level of debt coming out for your new attorneys coming into the office is?
A few years ago, it was not unusual to have 120,000 on average in debt. I've heard now that I've got some that are over 200,000 in debt. Law school is extremely expensive. Some of them can get some deferment programs by being in a DA's office, but it's a substantial amount.
And what do those new district attorneys get paid per year when they come into the office?
63,000 is what we're starting them at now.
So when they come into the office, they're getting paid $63,000, and they effectively have a house payment just based on school debt plus, you know, any other living expenses that they have out there as well.
And most of mine, I can tell you, in our area, I try to keep my starting pay close to what the Denver Metro is. I can't compete with Denver itself, but looking at Arapahoe and some of the others, we like to be close to that. If they want the 16th Street Mall, I can't compete with that. What I find I typically get are the family people. I hire a lot of people who have young families at the time because our community is a good community for families. I get a lot of outdoors people, people who want to, I get a lot of runners and a lot of hikers and people who want to be in the outdoors. But I got to tell you, the family people that join our office, not only when you look at the law school loans they've got, but now they're trying to support a wife and a couple of kids. And so that's not unusual in our office.
Wow, extremely stressful job, lots of school debt, and not making a ton of money. They must love what they do.
You know, that's really, someone asked me the other day, what do I enjoy about my job the most? One of the things I really enjoy is you go there and you're to do justice. There aren't many jobs you go into each day and you say, the thing for me to do today is the right thing. It's nice to be around people who are there for that purpose, whether what the pay is or not. You see a lot of the resumes that we get into our office are people who are giving back to the community in other ways already, that they're already volunteering for things because they want to give back to the community, they want to help people. It's nice to come into an office each day with that kind of attitude. But they'll be there for a couple of years, they'll struggle, they can see what they can get in private pay or what they can get in another office, let's say going north. And so I may lose them if they're a career prosecutor to another office, or I may lose them to the private sector when they're worried about, you know, their kids and putting their kids through college and things like that.
And you've been there for about 9 years now. Do you have a sense for how the pay has changed over that time for your deputies?
We've been able to make some substantial changes. The biggie was that minimum. I got to tell you, in 2016, when you just brought everybody to the minimum, it had a huge impact on my office. I've actually been there, I started in 1982 in the DA's office. And when you say I've been there, that's how long I've been elected, is about 9 years. I started at 17,000. And that was a struggle. I remember when I got my pay raise to 19,000, that was my break-even point finally. And that was back in 1983, 84. I'd say when I came in, were we starting in the 40s for our mid-40s? for our starting pay for our deputy DAs, and it was hard attracting people into the office at that. The midpoint, or the minimum that brought us up, made us a lot more competitive. If I'm not staying within 10,000 of the metro area, not counting Denver itself, I have a hard time just getting resumes into my office. The next thing is retaining, which is something we've been looking at. A lot of the minimum money goes to the entry level, but we need to retain good attorneys in that 5 to 15-year range attorney.
Thank you.
That answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's the same thing if I look at my investigators and other positions in terms of pay.
Commissioner Fender.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. May, thanks for the presentation and so forth, and I appreciate all the dedication that your staff has. I see, you know, I don't know if it's by design or what have you, but you have this minimum salary equity thing listed first in the salary needs. I think we've got a number that's associated with, you know, a fiscal number that's associated with what it would take to fix that salary inequity. And I don't know if that is something that's going to be presented to us again later, and I can defer to that time.
You can.
Or, because I do have an interest in addressing that particular point. That, to me, is a sense of unfairness across our own internal, you know, county operations. And so if we're going to have a conversation later on, that'd be great. I just want to know if we're going to do that later, and we probably will, but go ahead.
We will. The presentation that I have this afternoon is just going to address compensation in general and the financial roadmap and the stepping from minimum to midpoint and what we have done so far through the financial roadmap. As far as individual specific departments and inequity within the organization, we worked really hard to address that in prior years. As these have been brought to our attention, job descriptions, and in fact, Mr. May is currently working with our HR department to go through those detailed job descriptions to determine, because when you don't have a complete apples to apples comparison, sometimes you have to determine which way we maneuver with that. So that process is occurring. We actually have a handful of those within the county, and I will speak to those at much greater detail, but I believe our best strategy is to address those on an ad hoc basis as they come to our attention once, based on the determination of our Human Resources Department.
Okay, great, thank you. So it sounds like part of our conversation this afternoon will address that specifically, and you have an approach in that conversation about how to address that.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
So we've been working very hard with her, and actually all the elected officials have. We've been working very closely together to come up with what we think is a very fair and equitable plan across the county. So I think she'll be making a presentation this afternoon. I'll be interested in watching it, but I think it's one you'll see your other elected officials very strongly supporting behind what I think will be presented. That I think is very equitable for all the agencies.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. And this one, it may actually be more for Nicola. What's presented here, I see 2016, 2017. I don't see the 2018, so I can't tell what the real increase is from 2017 to 2018. And then my question is the critical needs that you're requesting, was that already included in the budget option presented 3 weeks ago, or will this be above what was in that original projected budget?
So in regard to all the 2018 budgets, what we have is a revised financial roadmap that you will see next week. And so in some of the departments and offices presentations, you don't see a 2018 budget, because until you as a board give, the majority of you give direction on how we will proceed with the 2018 budget, we cannot build those amounts in. So our district attorney would not have built in the 2018 budget because he does not know yet what, if anything, would be allotted to that department or office based on the direction of this board.
So the budgets you presented 3 weeks ago.
If I were asking for a person, I'd be putting up, here's how much a deputy DA costs, here's how much we're asking for an increase. If I were asking for the investigator, I know exactly what it costs an investigator. Since mine is more looking at the salary issue, I believe Nicola is going to be presenting you some options and the roadmap that was there starting in 2016. What you believe is appropriate for the county as a whole will then impact my budget and will sort of be in her presentation, but then I'll know where you're directing it. If that makes sense.
Okay, but 3 weeks ago, there was a 2018 budget presented. that included all the different sections.
That's correct.
Some had increases. So was there not a number for the district attorney's office?
So in the budget that you received, the item that would impact the district attorney's office would be the compensation component. And for the for the preliminary balanced budget, that was just put in as one line item. So we did not allocate, if you'll recall through that presentation, we did not allocate a specific amount to the district attorney's office. When we get to the compensation piece, you'll understand why, because there's a couple different ways that you can approach this. And as far as whether you would like to do an across-the-board, a COLA, a pay-for-performance, or whether you would like to do an adjustment to minimum, those amounts would be allocated and weighted differently. So that is why that is not specifically, those amounts are not specifically allocated in the departments yet until we receive direction from this board. It is just a line item I think it's in budget support.
Without that compensation information, what was the 2018 projected budget for the DA?
Same as the 17.
Okay.
And these future needs, I just would want to clarify, these are future needs that the district attorneys is stating that they will need in 19 moving forward into future years. It is not being requested for 2018. So it is not currently built into the 2018 financial roadmap.
Commissioner Littleton.
Thank you. So just so I understand, for clarification, so it was presented as one of the budget considerations a few weeks ago, the adjustment to midpoint for countywide, which includes the DA's office. So the increase here, looking at the DAO budget that's presented on page 11, the $12,887,000, and then the one presented on slide 16, the $12,978,000. So there's a difference of $688. So what exactly is that increase of $91,000 for? I guess is my question.
I'd have to get back to you on that.
Okay.
It could be a grant that was approved supplemental to the budget, or is not part of the ongoing budget. We'll have to get back to you on that.
Okay. It was on, in mine anyway, I think it hopefully correlates with yours. Page 11, it was doing the 10-county survey, and it was reported that $12,887,000 is the El Paso County budget for the DAO. And then on page 16, it shows that there's a total of, actually, it's even more than that, because I only did the 12,000.
Commissioner?
Yes.
This is actually 2016 budget comparison, because at the time this chart was provided, we didn't have the 2017 budget comparison. Right. So it should be the 2016 number.
Your page 11 is your 10 county 2016. We just took that straight from you. Your page 16 is my 2017 budget. Those are two different years.
Correct. So what I was asking is the difference, and actually it's a larger difference than I calculated, because I didn't do the 13 million. So
you gave us a pay raise last year for 17.
Okay. All right. So what you're saying is the 16 budget was what we had. The 17 budget is what you're functioning on. So the 13,695,000 on page 16 doesn't show any increase. That just is what your budget is this year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
That is correct. That's
Okay.
my 2017 budget.
Okay.
It actually had 3 personnel you gave us last year when we were doing this.
Correct.
You gave pay raises
Okay.
across.
Good. That's what I needed clarification on. Thank you.
Okay.
So yeah, that's kind of an apples and oranges, because the other one, 16, which is the
Gotcha.
newest that you had. We take
Right.
that, because you
Okay.
guys work in the 10 county, we put that in there.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the DA? Great.
So it's clear. The pay increases we're asking for, if the end, let's say you decide to do a cost of living increase of 1% across the county, well, I can easily calculate what's 1% of my personnel budget, and that's how much it would increase. That's why we need direction from you to put it in there. If you're looking at the 5-year plan that we have, again, if you put 1%, or actually that one's not a 1% as much as you're trying to bring everybody up, so they probably take like my people that are 25% behind and try to make everybody in the county, let's say 15% behind or 20% behind. Well, once you set that number, I can easily give you that figure that if you take everybody to make sure there's nobody more than 20% behind, here's how much would go to my office. Does that make sense? So I can give you those numbers, but that's why we're saying we kind of need direction of what you're going to do to know what that.
Does that,
Because those numbers are weighted differently depending on the approach that this board takes.
okay.
We can easily calculate
Right.
have some suggestions.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Right, and my question just goes back to the general for any of the departments. When I see the numbers, I can see, well, there's already a built-in 3% for operations or other issues, and so if we need to increase, say, 3% to your salaries or 4%, and in your case, that's 95%. So that's a very clean, I can tell, okay, well, 4% is going to be quite a bit. That would be added to the 3% increase already projected, and so 6-7%. If you're at 0%, well, then 4% is, you know, I know the anticipated revenue increase for the budget was 4.5%. Well, that's a very reasonable, but if I don't see where the change in the 2017 and 2018 budget, I don't have a starting point. So I'm going to grab my budget after lunch so I can start comparing the numbers. But so yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
The other thing I do want to point out, it was raised one time by some commissioners that, and particularly since we have a couple new people, well, I'm a bigger office than some of the others in the county, so if you do a percentage, let's say, to each office, why can't I just use that since I'm a bigger office and do the adjustments? You know, if you give everybody 2%, my 2% is bigger than the clerk recorder because I just have more people. And we actually put up some numbers to demonstrate that if one year when I think they gave us 3%, 2% or 3%, if I put 100% towards my investigators, it actually wasn't enough money to adjust them within equal pay to the sheriff's office, and everybody else in my office got 0. So actually that doesn't work. So I just want you to know that if you're looking at the cost of living, I can't catch up through that method because it still keeps people progressing ahead. That's why I think that a blend is something that may be fair.
Anything else?
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you very much. Our next presenter is our coroner. Always love to have a presentation with the coroner before lunch.
Commissioner Glenn, if I'd known that, I'd brought you some photographs, but we'll dispense with that. Mine's going to be much shorter and I think is much easier to understand because I've only got 23, 24 employees. Our budget proportionally is probably larger because I have, there are 4 pathologists and I have toxicologists, and also running various kinds of equipment is expensive in terms of maintenance contracts and that. But we'll go into this here and see if I can control this. Or problem 1. There we go. Thank you. I discovered that at the same moment. I think it's helpful to look at some county comparisons when you start looking at the coroner's offices. These are the other 2 offices in the state that have closest numbers in terms of comparing with our county. Denver County, you can see their 2017 budget is $3.2 million. Our budget was $2.5 million, and I will remind you that my office brings in, will bring in a little over $500,000 in intergovernmental services that we provide, both for toxicology, because we're the only toxicology, postmortem toxicology, forensic toxicology laboratory in a coroner's office, and we also do autopsies from approximately 20 other counties. So you can see the numbers there, and then you can see Arapahoe's numbers. Their budget is obviously under ours, but then you can see the number of autopsies, which tells you the whole story of how hard people are working. So my point in all of this is that when you look at our office and we start looking at productivity, our office is really the busiest office in the state, and my folks hustle every day. And because of that, we're able to do a lot more with less. So this is kind of a summary. We've got, in terms of the 2017 additional income that we'll generate, we've already billed $414,000. And if you put the math to that, that looks like it's a little bit under 500,000. But for some reason, there's always a rush to come see us from other counties towards the end of the year. So I'm pretty confident that that will happen as well this year. In terms of the staff, we have 4 pathologists. I have an office administrator, an administrative assistant, 1 full-time transcriber, 1 part-time transcriber, a chief investigator who runs the investigations, which is, as time has gone on over the last years, has become more involved because the cases are more complex. And then there are 7 investigators that are on shift work. We have 2 on at any given time. I have a morgue supervisor. I've got 2 full-time autopsy assistants and 2 part-time because it's more efficient to have 2 part-time employees than try to have 1 full-time employee or to employ 2 full-time employees because they won't be that busy, particularly in the afternoons. And I have 4 toxicologists, and again, we're the only coroner's office that has 4 that has any toxicologists. And I also have a histologist who cuts our microscopic sections. Now, there's a couple little other things that people need to know and remember, and for the new commissioners, you may not. To my knowledge, we're the only office where where my investigators, when they are hired, spend anywhere from 6 weeks to 3 months or more, depending on how quick they learn how to do autopsies and to do them efficiently. So my people are cross-trained, even in our office today. So if we get hit with something big, I've got 6 or 7 other people that can help in the morgue. I've got same thing with investigators because, for example, my office administrative assistant not only was worked as a morgue tech, but then was a real good investigator for a few years and then moved over to the position she's in. So we've got all of these people that we can move around. My histologist the same way. He can assist in the morgue and he can help in investigations. So a lot of my people are cross-trained, and you don't see that in numbers of salaries and things like that. So it's important to keep that in mind. If you look at our population growth, it's no surprise. It's pretty much a straight line going up. And if I was a mathematical genius, I could probably figure out the slope of that line. But I'm about 45 years too late to do that. But anyway, it continues to go up, and I think that that's important. And one of the things to remember also, at least in my office, and it's the same way with law enforcement, whether it's the district attorney's office or the sheriff or CSPD, as well as the smaller jurisdictions as well, when you put more population, your crime rate goes up, and it may not go up proportionally. In fact, the studies were done decades ago where this shows there's kind of jumps when you get to certain critical population growths. So you can't say, well, your population is growing up only 3.5%, 4%, so your office should get 3.5%, 4% busier a year, and that's just not the way it works. These are total county deaths. The darker blue is El Paso County, and you can see how this has gone up. We've had, I've been here now 15 years, and in only 2 years did we ever have a case, a year where it dropped off on not the death rate, but in terms of the number of cases done. So every once in a while we have a blip where we'll be flat or it'll go down, and then the next year or so it'll shoot up, and I've got another photograph that will show that. So this is kind of a comparison. If you look to 2017, right now we're on target to have more deaths in this county. And then when we look at the autopsies that we do, you can see that we're going to go up again. We're probably going to hit right around 1,200. And you can see one of the dips that I was talking about in 2013, 2014. It went down 25, 30 cases, and then the next year it jumped up over 50. So that's kind of the way it is, and it's going to keep going that way as long as the county continues to grow. And as long as the population gets more dense, we're going to see more cases. And kind of to finish up, I don't have any critical equipment needs. It's taken, 8 or 9 years to get to where we are, and thanks to all the help from all the previous commissions, commissioners' courts over the years has gotten us not only into a really good, modern, functional building, but also we have the equipment that makes us much more efficient than some other offices because of what we have in the office. And I want to let you know that I've watched this. I've been a county employee since 2004. And one of the things that I've always noted here that I've also seen in other counties is the fact that the human capital, our workers, which if you're managing an office, running an office, whether it's small like mine or large like DHS or somebody else, everything depends on our workers. And we have got to reward them, and we've got to make it so that we don't have excessive turnover that some of the offices in this county have. And I certainly support the 5-year plan. If we need to make it 6 years or 7 to finish, I think that's a wise thing to do because we are making progress. I've had people that were below minimum in my office too, and we've gotten that taken care of. We still have a little bit more to go, but proportionally my office is kind of in the midpoint of the offices in terms of being behind. We're certainly not the leader in being in first place with midpoint pay and that. But I think that's something to keep in mind, and it's hard. I think it's hard if you don't have day-to-day contact with the people you're managing. I think it's hard to, sometimes you lose that really our workers and our employees are our most valuable resource, and we need to reward them and take care of them adequately as well. So that's all I have. Is there anybody that has any questions?
Questions? Commissioner Waller.
Thank you, Mr. President. What triggers the need for an autopsy, and why do we have so many more than similarly sized jurisdictions?
In short, we're doing our job. We're in state statute, and basically the state statutes dictate what the coroner's office to do, and basically we're to investigate certain kinds of cases, which is basically everybody who dies suddenly and unexpectedly outside of a hospital facility, okay? So our office does not only the ones that die within 24 hours of being in a hospital unless we've got an absolute, unless we have a doctor who is absolutely certain as to what happened and has it documented with laboratory testing or some other kind of testing. And then we look at all the hospice deaths across the county. So we're going to look at probably about 4,100 deaths this year. And if they fit into certain criteria, the bodies are going to be come in and looked at. In some cases, we may not do an autopsy, but we're going to draw toxicology. We're going to make sure that they weren't stabbed or shot or any kind of blunt trauma, anything like that. And we're going to get the medical records. We're going to look at those and then make a decision as to what we do. The Colorado legislature a couple of years ago adopted the National Association of Medical Examiners autopsy standards, which mandate what kind of autopsies have to be done and what kind of cases. And so that's what we offer, that we operate on. And in addition, the state of Colorado legislature in their wisdom, and I really mean that sincerely, included individuals who were killed in traffic accidents and who died at the scene or before you could make a diagnosis, because those autopsies need to be done not only for criminal charges, but also has a lot of civil implications as well. So that's kind of how we function.
Okay.
And I'd be happy to provide you a list of those. I'd be happy to send an email them to you if you'd like that.
Commissioner Littleton.
Thank you. Well, I was on the governor's coroner standards and training board for many years, and I will tell you, bar none, we have a gem in our community. Dr. Bucks was by far the most highly qualified and trained physician and coroner in the state of Colorado, by far. I mean, heads and shoulders above. And I know that his staff that he hires also has the same qualifications and training that exceed those of other counties, which is why so many other counties decide to bring their autopsy cases and some of their other cases to El Paso County. I have the greatest respect and highest regard for them, and especially in just having gone through the whole hospice process. I appreciate Dr. Bucks walking me through that in advance of what was going to happen, what could I expect, and so I really appreciate that. You guys do a fantastic job, and I'm really glad that over the last few years we were able to get you machinery that was going to help you perform your tasks more effectively and efficiently. I'm glad that we were able to get you facilities that were a little more kosher, that really met the standards of what we do want for this type of support within our community. So thank you, Dr. Bucks.
Well, thank you. And for the newer commissioners, you need to talk to Commissioner Glenn and Commissioner Littleton to explain what the facility was that we were in previously. I don't want to say something, but trust me, whatever they say is going to be what they saw, and it won't be sugar-coated.
Commissioner Vanderwood, were you?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. Dr. Bucks, thank you for the presentation, and I appreciate also your hosting me. I took a tour of your facility, and you were able to explain to me, and I was able to see it in person, the upgraded modern technology that you have in your labs, and so that was fascinating to me. I'm not an expert at this business, but I do know, and I think it's interesting. It's reflective, I think, of the skill sets as well as the equipment that practically the entire Southeast region comes, perhaps not for all of their coroner services, but for many of their coroner services, to you. So you are really, in many respects, providing regional services as opposed to just El Paso County services, and you alluded to that in the charts here. So I thought that was, that was something that I noted. I thought that was very interesting, and it's because of the training and the equipment that you've been able to achieve as far as upgrades and talent. So thanks for that. And I know that we're actually providing that service, to a greater extent beyond El Paso County, and that you get reimbursed for that when you do those services.
We do just fine on that, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Always a pleasure. Yeah. Okay, well, that brings us to our lunch break. We are looking at our schedule. The assessor is going to start off at 1 o'clock. So we will stand in recess. Lunch is up in our conference room. So, okay. Now back on the record with our budget presentation, and we have our assessor's office is up next.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Steve Schleicher, your county assessor. Before I kick this off, I think I owe an apology to a lot of folks here this afternoon. I went in and tweaked some of the PowerPoint templates and did not know they were in nice little binders for you all. And so there was folks, the term is scurrying around making those corrections. So my apologies, and thanks to everybody that took care of that for me. But your 1 o'clock presenter is all about brevity. So this is going to be pretty dang quick.
Raises budget.
So as you see here, the organizational chart, it's pretty simple in my office. Currently, I have a total of 48 FTEs. As you see here, the county assessor, my job is the management and operation of the county assessor's office, which includes the annual preparing, documenting, and making budget recommendations, as well as the management of all my personnel. My residential department is the primary function, of course, is to value all improved buildings or structures on residential parcels. Non-residential, that includes the commercial, land, and also business personal property. I also have a GIS mapping department, and this department is responsible for the coordination of the geographic information and data for assessment purpose and maintenance of the countywide geographic systems. So if you don't know, is the assessor is responsible for the custodian of the public data and also mapping the county. My support services department provides assistance, processes organizational, personal exemptions such as the senior homestead disabled veteran exemptions, which is near and dear to my heart. Processing deeds, as I've come before you before, we are extremely busy. We're in a very hot market, so there are a lot of deeds going on. In fact, we're at triple the amount that we were 5 years ago. In addition, they process the senior homestead and disabled veterans exemptions, as I mentioned. I do have an information services employee, and she monitors and maintains the assessor applications, operations, and networks. And my administrative staff prepares property appeals, my finance, human resources, and assessor communications. Mandates and state statutes require. My office is established under Section 8, Article 14 of the Colorado Constitution, according to Title 30 of the Colorado Revised Statutes. So what are the assessor's duties? By definition, the assessor's duty are to discover, identify, and list property. The records of the assessor are public, and the assessor is considered to be the custodian of these records here within El Paso County. The availability of information regarding real property on this site complies with 24-72-203 Colorado Revised Statute, which in part states, custodians shall take such measures as are necessary to assist the public in locating any specific public record sought and to ensure public access to the public record without unreasonable delay or unreasonable cost. Such measure may include, without limitation, the availability of viewing stations for public records kept on microfiche, the provision of portable disk copies or computer files, or direct electronic access via online bulletin boards or other means. So one thing property owners have taken advantage of is they come into my office and they want to review their complete property back to when it was original platted. We still have the original plat books in my office. Pretty interesting stuff. If you ever stop by and want to see it, and old North End or what General Palmer owned, that is still in my office in the old land books. And at that time where the folks writing in there used calligraphy, the penmanship is impeccable. Pretty neat stuff. What is the purpose statement? The purpose statement that I implemented when I was elected is our mission is to meet or exceed the statutory requirements, rules, and regulations of the state of Colorado in the administration of El Paso County's property assessment and mapping system that is accurate, fair, and equitable to the citizens, and to serve our customers in a courteous and efficient manner that fosters mutual respect and understanding. Here are my objectives. Provide property owners with current, accurate information in a professional, courteous, and efficient manner, offering the highest level of customer service. Provide uniform, fair, and equitable value assessments on all real and personal property within our county. Provide parcel mapping and parcel ownership information that is current and accurate. Provide other departments, taxing districts, and local government with current, accurate information on which they can base their decisions. And let's talk about my budget. So I am allocated 52 full-time employees, but as I stated, I currently have 48 full-time employees. And my 2017 budget is approximately $3.7 million. And the property taxes are the local agency's major source of general purpose revenue. My office, the property tax assessment roles, establish the property tax base for all local government agencies in El Paso County, including our cities, special district, and school districts. So how is that budget broken down? So 90% of my budget is on salary. 10% of it is dedicated to operations, which is completely eaten up in postage. So when we mail out those Valentine letters, otherwise known as a notice of value. My office conducts appraisals of each property in El Paso County. Then we estimate the value of that property for ad valorem taxation purposes. The assessed valuation of the property determines the share of local property taxes. Currently, there is nearly 275,000 taxable and exempt parcels and over 21,000 taxable personal property schedules in El Paso County. So here's how this is broken down. Here in El Paso County, when you look at vacant land, residential, commercial, agricultural, exempt property, our natural resources, industrial, and personal property. So if you did not know, we are the largest county in the state of Colorado, total parcel count. But I will tell you, I'm extremely proud in the fact that El Paso County is the largest county in the state of Colorado in our total number of parcels. and my office is the smallest staffed office, 48 FTEs compared to our other metro counties. My staff most certainly has more work and responsibility than the others in their same position in other comparable counties. Here's basically what's going on in El Paso County taxable parcel count. We're growing. When you go back to 2014, the growth of total parcel count change, you know, we picked up nearly 2,000 parcels from 2013, 2014. And ever since we've been in a very hot market since our reappraisal year in 15 and 2017, we're averaging over 3,000 parcels per year. And I'm estimating that to be over 3,300 for 2017 because we just now closed our books to start our final certification and tax warrant process. So a lot of good news going on here in El Paso County. In addition, here are some operating indicators. From 2016 to 2018, the total number of abstracts provided to taxing entities in 2016, we had 283. We're now up to 295 taxing entities. Number of phone calls that are handled, and I'll tell you, with our population growing and things going on here in El Paso County, we're not seeing that much increase in telephone calls, and that's due to the efficiency of my website. Number of maps produced, we get, you know, requests quite a bit, you know, to do maps for districts or property owners. Those are increasing. The number of appeals, I will tell you, I'm extremely proud and have been here in El Paso County. I am proud of the fact we're unadversarial. We have the lowest appeal rates in the state of Colorado for any metro county, and I can say that on record. When you're looking at increasing values as we did between 10 to 15% for our 2017 reappraisal, and we had 3,900 appeals. So my staff's doing a great job. The number of residents inventoried and measured, and as you see there, you know, we're keep going up. We got a lot of new construction going on. My commercial and residential appraisers are staying busy out there, picking up the new construction. And as you can see, the number of property transfers logged, those are the deeds that are coming in. So things are doing very well. You know, I've heard the term from other assessors at winter conference or summer conference that, you know, oh my gosh, you know, everything's busy. This market is, you know, unbelievable. You know, we're busy, we're busy, we're busy. Well, my statement to my staff is we're back to normal. And that's exactly how I feel about it, is this is what normal is. When we were in the real estate crash in 2007, that's what the abnormal was. So here are my budget highlights for 2018. First and foremost, maintain exceed standards property assessment levels and uniformity measurements to ensure a fair and equitable assessment is achieved here in El Paso County. Continue in leveraging technology, developing, testing new process and paradigms, and transforming some policies and practices and procedures to improve workflows and promote operational efficiencies. I would like to thank each and every one of you. I have increased efficiencies when we launched Community. That increased the usage of my website by 10%, and when you're getting hit over 37 million times a year, you can imagine what that number is. In addition to that, is we are getting ready to launch another portion of that. We are replacing the property record card, and in addition to that, there's going to be Comper, and it's called Comper for Citizen, where now our property owners will be able to go out there and pick their comps based on my information and map that out. And if they don't agree with the value, they can send that to me in a PDF form on an online appeal for every class of property here in El Paso County. The other thing that a majority of the real estate community and our citizens are excited about, it is now the website is going to be compatible with iPads and also to our smart devices. Because we know of most of our real estate community, their office is now their car. So also, I am dedicated and I support the professional growth and development of my staff and also the 5-year roadmap. And if you allow me, I wrote a statement here. I am definitely in support of our 5-year roadmap, and I ask you all to do the same. In today's world, the key to any organization, office, or departmental success relies on customer satisfaction. As a result, servicing customer needs is a top priority for my office. However, in years past, we, the employer, have delayed to act upon the satisfaction of the employees of El Paso County, and those employees are our internal customers. Can an organization, office, or department service the needs of its clients' customers properly when they fail to satisfy the needs of the internal customer? Our employees are valuable assets of an organization and the key to our successes, which is why I strongly support the 5-year financial roadmap. We, the employer, need to understand that a content and motivated employee has a higher probability of making significant contributions to our organization. We, the employer, should understand that the relationship between the external customers and internal customers is symbiotic. Without one, you wouldn't have the other. Henceforth, the mantra for success for the employer, in my opinion, is to take care of your employees, who will in turn take care of your business. All done for the assessor.
All right, questions? We have to give him one at least. Okay, Commissioner.
I was going to say, the word is I'm scurrying.
I know, that was very brief. Thank you for your brevity. I think we had talked to our regional building and also to Craig Dossey over at Building Services to see, it sounds like they've got a new system that they're working on to make sure that possibly some of it can be connected to your new system, because they've got information and data that I think would also be valuable, but will never be looked at if people can't access it easily or remember. And it would just be simple to have that put on the clerk and recorder, or not, but on the assessor's side, I'm sorry, so that they could look at all that information. Are you guys working with them at all? Or?
For the first time, Commissioner, I'm 3 steps ahead of you.
Okay.
In fact, Craig Dossey and I have already talked about it, and I have agreed to put the link on the website. It basically be a one-stop shop for, and that's the way I look at a one-stop shop for our citizens. So I received a prototype of the website today. My staff is going over there and looking at the tabs. Once we outline those tabs, I do plan on sitting down with Craig and going, where are we going to put this? But his tab is definitely going to be on the assessor site.
Excellent. We'll have to give him kudos too, because he actually did what we asked him to do several weeks ago. So good job. Thank you so much for working on that.
Yes, ma'am.
Great. Any other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you. Happy Veterans Day, everybody.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, next up, we have a presentation from Human Resources. Yay. I know.
Nicola, I will need help.
Excuse me. You guys doing tight. Andrea's here.
There it is. Good afternoon, Commissioners. Andrea McGee, Human Resources and
You
Risk
gotta have to
Management.
move that mic. There we go.
you.
All right.
Good afternoon, Commissioners. Andrea McGee, Human Resources and Risk Management. I will try my best to do it under 10. I would like to give you a brief overview over my department. As you can see, I have currently 18 FTEs filled. I have 3 unfilled. I'm struggling to find some HR professionals with the expertise that we need here at El Paso County. I have currently an HR manager that is also our compensation analyst, Kirsty Anderson. She is sitting over here. I have risk management and workers' compensation manager, Ricky Bransford. He is also sitting over there. We have 1 claims adjuster, 1 risk management coordinator, 2 employee relations specialists that also serve as investigator for employee relation issues. We have an HR supervisor, compensation specialist, and HR data specialist, and then most of all, our HR coordinators that are doing the day-to-day function in HR. We provide recruitment, hiring process, job postings, job fairs. We have increased our social media recruiting to LinkedIn and all websites to find qualified candidates with the county. My department facilitates interviews, assists department with interview questions, schedules applicants, and like I said, coordinates the interviews. We conduct employment screens. We are managing the pre-employment screening process to include for hiring approvals, background checks, drug screens, motor vehicle checks, and physicals, drug screens, and of course, we assist departments with checking references. We conduct the onboarding for all county employees. And I forgot to mention, we provide county service-wide HR functions to all departments except the district attorney's office. District attorney has their own department. Currently, we have also been conducting HR functions for the clerk and recorder's office. We are the official custodians for all personnel files for El Paso County. We are providing services regarding performance evaluations, payroll change request forms, employment verifications, and we are the point of contact for all HR-related questions. In coordination with County Attorney's Office, we are providing policy interpretation, we are conducting investigation, and we are providing recommendations to the department heads regarding all employment-related questions. We, in coordination with County Attorney, we have unemployment hearings. Kirsty Anderson, who sits to my left, she is in charge of the compensation, job description, FLSA compliance, compensation studies, salary surveys, position classification, and we have developed a position control system for 2017, which was really needed. Our training and organizational development, we are conducting new supervisor manager training, the mandated training, for example, harassment training, again in coordination with County Attorney's Office. And we also are in the process of providing performance management system training. Risk management, Ricky Bransford. We have workers' compensation. All of our workers' compensation claims are handled in-house. We are conducting the property claims, liability claims, countywide insurance. Our CDL program, which stands for Commercial Driver's License Program, we conduct random drug testing and recertification for DOT medical examinations. And we have a monitoring of all employees' motor vehicle records, which means only employees who are required to drive on county time, whether they have a personal vehicle or a county vehicle. We make sure that El Paso County follows the Fair Labor Standards Act, Equal Employment Opportunities, Colorado Governmental Immunity Act, Colorado Workers' Compensation Act, and the CDL, Federal Motor Carrier Safety Regulations. Our strategic plan, we are looking for opportunities to improve and enhance retention by recognizing the county's best practices, identifying areas for potential improvement, implement an effective training and mentorship program to provide current and future employees with the skills they need to effectively carry out their day-to-day responsibilities. We are in the process of expanding the El Paso County Apprenticeship and Training Program to provide high-quality training by industry professionals. And we are planning for future vacancies of positions that are crucial for the operations of the county through training and development of staff, supplemented through external recruiting when needed. I wanted to give you some exciting presentation, which I can't compare to the sheriff and the DA. So I would like to give you some statistics or some numbers. In 2015, my department conducted 419 background checks, 2016, 439, and until October 1st, 504. interview facilitation, interesting enough, while it increased, we are hiring in some interviews 25 people within one interview panel. So for example, you have a position of a security technician, and they are interviewing for 3 days, and they will hire 25 people because they know the turnover is there. We have processed in 2015 293 new hires, 2016 307, and up until October 1, 481. Application processed, and this is what I would like to point out. In 2015, we have received 27,095 applications. 2016, 28,920, and this year so far, only 24,689. The applications we receive become less and less. I wanted to point out workers' compensation, thanks to Ricky Bransford, our claims have decreased, and we're very proud of this, from 175 to 148 to 137. And I'm knocking on wood, I hope it doesn't change till the end of the year. Motor vehicle checks, we have conducted 367 in 2015, 664 in 2016, and 686 as of October 1. Physicals, the reason why 2016 has been so high with 422, the Sheriff's Office had 3 academies during this time. As of today, as of October 1, 282 for this year. Drug screens, we are conducting drug screens since 2016 for all county employees, and we went from 367 to 600, 70. As of October 1, we have conducted 484. Our property and liability claims, which also include mailboxes, 2015, 155, 239 last year. As of today, as of October 1, 282, which also includes our hail damage. I have been thinking about the highlights for my department, because I have everyday highlights, I think. So the only things that came up was that really stuck to my mind. In March, we took over the Sheriff's Office HR department, and that was a big undertaking that I would say primarily I have to thank my HR manager for this. Kirsty, she has been the contact person with the Sheriff's Office and done an outstanding job, and I'm happy to say we transitioned very well. We are still in the process of conducting a supervisor-manager training. We started already, but we would like to build it out and add some additional classes. My budget for 2017 is $1,457,051. And I am not requesting any additional funding at this time. I am asking you to please, in order to reduce the costly hiring and retraining due to the increased turnover that we have at El Paso County, as well as maintaining quality customer service, I strongly support investing in human capital countywide. Thank you.
Okay. Questions? Commissioner Littleton.
Just a couple. So I think one of them you clarified. When people come to you, since you guys are in the human resources field, when people come to you with a job description or to fill a slot because they have a slot available, do you work with them on like job description or how to consolidate and morph jobs to look differently because of potentially technology differences? That would be one of my questions. Absolutely.
So actually the department, the managers or the department heads come and actually speak with Kirsty or with one of the employees that Kirsty worked for Kirsty. They are breaking everything down. We are requesting job descriptions from other government entities, from other organizations. We compare 100%. Kirsty can give you a little bit more detailed explanation. Would you like that?
Sure. If you'd like to. I don't know if you guys called it position control or something like that, but.
So position control is a little bit
Different,
different.
okay.
But,
Okay.
So whenever a department has an open position, they generally get with us before posting, obviously, to request the job description to see what we currently have on file. And they'll see if it still matches what they're needing at that time. If not, we go through and we make the changes. Sometimes whenever they're starting completely from scratch, it's helpful for them to see job descriptions from other counties. We'll request those, as well as other descriptions within El Paso County, if it's a similar position that may be in another department.
Okay, great, thanks.
Oh, and then in terms of position control, that tracks all of the full-time employees. It's not a tracking of part-time or temporary.
Okay.
So before we do post any positions, whenever they request it, we do verify that they have the available FTE.
Okay.
And then it does allow for a history tracking, which we didn't have previously, to see where a position has gone to. Maybe it was at one point a caseworker 3 that went to a 4 that they refilled with a 1 at some point.
May I go on
Go,
with my
please,
second question?
yeah.
Okay. Second question is, so why is the DA separate? And, the sheriff was able to consolidate with you guys. Why is the DA separate?
Commissioner, I cannot answer that. That would be an answer for the DA.
Okay. Be interesting to know how many positions they have over there that could be consolidated. How many positions did the sheriff's office were they able to eliminate by combining human resources?
I believe the sheriff's office had 3 civilian position and 1 sworn position in HR.
That they were able to eliminate by consolidating with
That's
you?
correct.
Interesting. Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Gonzalez.
Well, to follow up on that, so if they had 4 positions, when you consolidated, did you increase any when you took over?
I did receive 2.
Okay,
2
thank you.
FTEs from him.
Great. Anything else? Oh, Commissioner Vanderwerth.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm just trying to, I know that it varies year to year, and particularly when the economy is really good, it can increase. But what is the turnover rate? And perhaps you can't actually give us that number in 2017 yet, but when I look at the new hire paperwork, trying to use that as a marker, I don't know if that's a valid marker. That looks like, on a basis of 2,880 employees, under 17% turnover.
So actually, our deputy county administrator, she has this number in the presentation that she will make regarding compensation.
Okay.
We did provide her, and you will really see.
Okay. And Nicola gave me a big, huge smile, which I think meant, yeah, she's got the data, or something like that.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. I'll wait for that.
The reason for the difference in the new hire paperwork was because we have now started doing the clerk and recorder's new hire paperwork temporarily in September, and then in March of 17, we started doing the sheriff's office. And the sheriff's office is really significant, so that would be what drove those numbers up there.
Any other questions? Great. Thank you very much. Oh, I know. Yeah, that's what I just. Okay, yes,
It is me.
it is you. And I'm assuming that we gave our public health
We
heads up
did.
that we are running early.
We did, Commissioners. I believe we advised him to be here at 2 o'clock. So
you.
that'll get us out of here. Commissioner Waller did provide some kind of encouragement to the departments and offices that could keep it brief, something in regards to percentages and budgets and those types of things. So,
Is that okay?
you know, you get the support of 2 other commissioners and we're all set to go. We're all set to go. Commissioners, I'm really here representing the entire the entire county here. The compensation report is something that is done that the compensation presentation is really something that is done where we look at, of course, you know, in years past, each department and office kind of did their own assessment and brought forward what their own adjustments needed to be, and they would do their own analysis. And then over the years, as we have consolidated the HR function and everybody has come together and participated in the compensation study, that is something that we've been able to consolidate, which allows me to come forward with a county-wide compensation to look at all departments and offices individually and then in the aggregate. And so as I go through this, if there's questions whether I'm speaking in the aggregate or individually, just let me know. But really, this is to provide a little bit of the groundwork and the background of what we have done over the years. My presentation should not take that long, but I know there's going to be a lot of questions. Also, we have specific numbers and spreadsheets that we had planned on providing next Thursday after you have heard from all departments and offices. We feel that is only fair and equitable than to put these numbers in front of you before you've had the opportunity to hear from the other departments and offices. So with that, the presentation will go through history, obviously because we've got 3 new commissioners, comprehensive compensation study, pay for performance, cost of living, and then a summary. Really, to give you an idea, the investment in human capital, which is what we are calling this, because we know, commissioners, and I've stated this every year during budget presentations, that we are a personnel service-based organization. And obviously, when you are a service-based organization, as all local governments are, you depend heavily on your personnel to provide those services. And you really need to have, to effectively provide those services, you really need to have a well-trained, experienced workforce. That is critical to providing those services to our citizens. Through the years, we've heard, for example, you know, the clerk's office saying if we have a well-trained individual in this position, they can produce twice as many transactions as somebody who is not. So obviously that is critical. And even with innovative solutions and maximizing technology, 62% of our 2017 budget is still personnel, and that's overarching, including both your restricted and unrestricted funds. And we have had several instances over the years where we have implemented technology. The assessor's office is a great example of that, implementing iPads instead of carrying stacks of paper, boxes of paper out when they go on site to do their assessments. As we have implemented that, we have been able to do reductions in force, if you will, to eliminate specific positions. And then we have also, where I've seen it the most effective through the last 10 years or so, is as we've had demands come forward in terms of trying to recover from our budget deficits, and as those demands have continued to increase and we have not had the capacity or the ability to reinstate, that technology has helped us keep up with those increasing workloads. And so that's helped to mitigate that. Currently, based on your most recent FTE count that I looked at, that's full-time employees. That's authorized. That's not necessarily filled, but that is what has been authorized based on operational needs. And usually comes through the budget process, is 2,715. That does include health department, which of course is a separate legal entity, but that does include their count as well. But we do of course process payroll for them, so that is the count that we have. So really, commissioners, human capital is the backbone of our organization. I don't think I can stress that enough, and I think you've heard that today, and I think you'll continue to hear that through these presentations. We knew prior to the Great Recession, it was always kind of a given, at least I know in the time frame I've been here since 2001, that El Paso County employees have historically been paid less than our peers. We carried it for a long time as a badge of honor. We do more with less until we really started to hit critical mass. And so we knew that, and if you go back through and we've got pay adjustments back through 20 years. And if you look at them, you can see several years where the counties, the employees literally did not receive any adjustments. And you can see that throughout the history of pay increases with our employees. And, you know, so we knew that we were always paid less. And then during the Great Recession, of course, the extensive cuts that we had to make really compounded the issue for us. As we know, because personnel is our largest cost, when we had to do our budget reductions, 2006 to 2009, personnel was absolutely hit the hardest. We know we had a reduction in force of over 12%. We eliminated 195 positions, and we froze another 100. Excuse me, can you close the blinds behind the commissioners? I'm sorry, I have a terrible glare. Oh, thank you. So when we eliminated those positions and froze the other 100, that was almost 300 employees. And so what happened there is you had employees that were already paid less, and now you increase their workload. So for example, if you had a team of 5, and now you had to eliminate one of those 5 members, everybody else's workload, that 20% had to get spread through the rest of the team. And that's what we saw, because even though we had to do that reduction in force, we still had significant compliancy as it relates to our mandated services that we're legally required to provide. And so during that time frame, Commissioner, we've talked about this, kind of the dark days for us. Morale obviously dropped to an all-time low. So in November 2013, by that time, we had 5 years of continuing to carry additional workloads. But as we came out of the Great Recession, we started to see significant personnel issues really began to surface. They really started to impact operations, much like we did with our fleet and much like we did with our roads. When we weren't able to maintain them ongoing, things started to slip. And that's what we started to see with the personnel. So here they are carrying additional workloads, and then by November 2013, in a very short time frame, just over a year's time frame, our staff then took on additionally even greater loads to address and respond effectively to the 3 natural disasters at that time. It was really all hands on deck. And our workload internally, as you know, we did the bulk of it internally, and our workload increased significantly. So that is really, Commissioners Littleton and Glenn can speak to that, this is really when everything came to a head with us as it relates to personnel. That's when burnout and fatigue set in. We started losing employees in key positions, and we started seeing things slip through the cracks. Things weren't happening. We were concerned we were going to not meet a mandate. We were concerned we were not going to have compliancy. Quite frankly, things just kept cropping up. And so the Board of County Commissioners at that point gave direction to perform a detailed comprehensive compensation study. And they requested to determine the inequities by individual position. So if I can take a step back, those budget presentations at that time was very much all the departments and offices fighting for equities within their positions, within their departments, and then across the county. And many of them had done a lot of their own analysis. They suspected that their employees were paid 25, 35, 40% under, and the commissioners, after hearing this through several presentations, through several budget years, finally said, okay, we just need to do a comprehensive study and get some real data so that we can address this county-wide in the aggregate, and to address these individual positions specifically. So with that, we headed into the compensation study, and what we did is El Paso County contracted with MSEC, which is Mountain States Employers Council. That is who really does these types of studies through in the state of Colorado, so they have a lot of comparative data. And we look to identify comparable positions within what is referred to as the Front Range Extra. And so really the Front Range Extra, and this is what MSCC deems to be comparable to El Paso County, are the cities and towns and counties along the Front Range from Fort Collins to Pueblo. Can I have the overhead? We actually have a little map. It's a handy dandy little map here. So really everything within the blue lines, commissioners, and I can get this map to you, was what was included within this survey, within this study. And so we looked at public sector comparison, but in some cases where there was not a comparable position in public sector, and I will just say because you know, some agencies, if I can have the presentation again, some agencies, some jurisdictions, they will either outsource or we have been creative and innovative, so we have developed a position to do it more effectively, more efficiently. We may not have had a comparable position in another public sector, another local government. They may not have had that same position. So in that case, some of our technical positions, we actually did comparisons to the private sector where it was necessary, where we couldn't identify or didn't have enough comparable data in the public sector. What's important to this is the process was so lengthy that it took almost 2 years to complete. And the reason why is because they went through 2,128 positions. This means they took individual specific job descriptions, you know, they're what, 2 pages long, looked at all the key job duties and functions within each of those job descriptions to identify comparable positions with these other agencies. So making sure that we're really comparing apples to apples here. Obviously, some of them are pretty obvious. If you have an accountant is an accountant. But some of them were very specialized, and because what we identified as well, where we had struggled and where I will say we're still struggling as an organization, and I believe Steve alluded to that, and I think Dr. Bucks as well, is they've done a lot of cross-training within their department. So we actually have certain positions where it may be a position that does job duties 1 through 5, but in El Paso County, that person also does job duties or is trained to do job duties 6 through 10, if you will. And that's because of what we were forced to do during those difficult times. So in some of these, it is difficult to compare because, and you'll probably hear this from the departments and offices, because some of our specific positions actually do more. But where we could, we tried to find something as comparable as we could. And so the steps that we went through is, not we, being MSEC and the county organization, is we compared pay ranges for each of those positions. And so the pay ranges obviously go from, if you're hiring this position, you start at the low end and then you go through to the middle and you go to the maximum range once you meet seniority and all your performances and all of that. And so we looked at the pay ranges for each of those positions. Those pay ranges varied depending on where they were within that front range extra. And so that inherently addresses the cost of living, because we know, for example, when you look at comparable salary ranges, and this is data that's provided to us by the group that MSEC contracts with, and interestingly, they don't do it by county, they do it by cities. But you can see if Metro Denver is the baseline at 100%, we know, for example, that Fort Collins, folks in Fort Collins are generally paid 94% compared to that. Colorado Springs, 93%, and then Pueblo, 89%. That's the city of Pueblo. And so those pay ranges would have shifted in accordance with this. So, of course, you've got multiple pay ranges layered on top of one another, if you will, to arrive at what an average pay range should be. And so they took the average of all the salaries within that position to arrive at a midpoint. And this is a simple mathematical average. They said, okay, and I just use the example here, county A, B, C, D, E. But they look at these and they say, okay, somebody has, this position is only paid $29,230, county C, or county B is $40,000, county C is $51,500, and then county E is $52,000. What they looked at then is they took an average and said, based on this, the midpoint should be $41,500. But then they established what was an appropriate range outside of this midpoint. And the reason why this is relevant, because they said based on this midpoint of this, and we already had different ranges coming in to arrive at this midpoint, but based on this final average midpoint, the new range, you should have a minimum of no less than this amount over here and no greater than this amount over here. So they really took kind of like a bell curve methodology, and they establish what should be an appropriate minimum or maximum range. What's really important to this, commissioners, is they discounted the outliers. And why that's important is because this position, they said, this is way too low. So this is way below an acceptable range based on this midpoint. So it was thrown out of the range. Why that's relevant to us is because most of our positions, quite frankly, were well outside of the range. And that is why on some comparative studies that other agencies do, they do not include El Paso County's data. They're starting to include us now, but for years did not include our data in their pay analysis and comparisons because of the outliers. And so after they went through this process and developed a new minimum, midpoint, and maximum for each of these positions, the study results came back and showed that the compensation was below an acceptable minimum of about 38% of our employees, or 810 positions, were below the minimum. And some of them were as much as 32.6% below the minimum. Just huge, huge variances and inequities that we were seeing here in El Paso County. And then they further said, once you get everybody to minimum, you still see that in comparing us to midpoint, to step from minimum to midpoint, in 2015 dollars was an additional $16.4 million in aggregate. Now that number is not $16.4 million today because we've taken some action moving forward, or in the last few years, and then we have in the financial roadmap to move forward. It's somewhere around $11 million right now when you take into consideration the pay, the FICA and retirement costs associated with it. But that was the information that was put in front of the commissioners back in 2015. And so as a result of this, the commissioners, so we knew that we were paid, that the scales were paid, that were highly inequitable in comparing to everybody else. And so the commissioners took a position to address the compensation below minimum and brought all employees to where they are that paid at least minimum comparative pay. And in addition to that, they provided a 2% pay for performance, which started the adjustment from minimum to midpoint. And then in 2017, Board of County Commissioners established a multi-year plan to step the employees from minimum to midpoint, and phase 1 of 5 was implemented for this budget year, 2017, which is $1.6 million across the board of 2% in 2017. So when you're looking at the compensation study and we're considering the multi-year plan to adjust from minimum to midpoint, which is what is currently built in your financial roadmap, there's a few things that we need to look at and consider. And some of these are items that you've individually brought to my attention. Some of them are department and office discussions that we've had. But effectively, based on a 5-year, taking us 5 years to implement the adjustment from minimum to midpoint, it would be complete by 2021, but considering the data was based on 2015 data, we know that comparative salary data would be 6 years old at that time. So what it doesn't address is effectively the cost of living and any salary range movements that everybody else is doing. So even if we were to say that the salary range every year based on a cost of living moves 1.5% throughout that 6-year time frame, simple math is that we would still be in 2021 9% below what the peers, what our peers are doing. And the question could be said, well, do we have to be with our peers? Well, when we're training employees and we're losing them to our peers and other agencies, that is really a problem, obviously, operationally through all our departments and offices. The other item to consider with this multi-year plan is it doesn't take into consideration pay for performance and cost of living. So it just takes in what was built into the 27 roadmap, just takes into consideration stepping everybody from minimum to midpoint. But what about those high performers that maybe are already right at midpoint that we need to retain, because it's not just attracting employees, it's retaining them as well, and then attempting to maintain some kind of cost of living as our cost of living increases for our employees as it does everybody else. And so the third item, which is really something that we have been focusing on, which speaks to some of the previous presentations we've seen, is that it does not address the impact of changing economic conditions. It takes into consideration the pay equity that was in place in 2015. Well, obviously, we've seen a great recovery out of the Great Recession, and the economy has naturally recovered in sync with this. And we know that when unemployment is down, that the demand for specialized and highly skilled positions increases. So that means that now we're not just competing with other government agencies, but we're also having to compete with some private sector, companies. And then we know that we're losing some staff to private sector, and our need to compete as our organization ages and we have other folks that have the ability, we have employees that have the ability to retire and they don't see any pay adjustments coming forward, they go ahead and retire. We lose that institutional knowledge. So our need to compete is increased even more to get somebody that is skilled and trained to the extent that we need to replace some of those seasoned employees that we're losing. And then hiring and retention issues. And, I don't think your departments and offices are going to really delve into this a lot. They're probably just going to throw out some examples, but I think you've already heard some this morning. You'll continue to hear that. We are having hiring and retention issues. Public Works, for the first time that I've seen in many years, Highway is losing staff to construction companies. So it's great if we want to invest in our infrastructure, but if we don't have the personnel there to actually drive the equipment and to lay the aggregate and asphalt that road, we can't get it done. Planning and community development, we know that now that, again, the economy is recovering, we're losing inspectors to private sector. This one is very concerning, information technology. Currently has 74 FTEs, which is authorized positions, but they have only been able to fill 59. And they are contracting out where they can, but they're having to contract out for some services and from specialized services when we could probably do it more cost effectively in-house. But because of our pay and being competitive, we are not able to identify and hire those skilled positions. So countywide, what we are hearing, because we have these meetings with all the departments and offices, countywide, what we're hearing collectively with HR is that top candidates for positions are declining offers. They apply for positions, we go through the interview process, and in many cases you get down to the third or fourth choice that we're actually hiring because those top choices are not accepting these positions because they're getting offered something, for example, that could be $20,000 more somewhere else in the community or in a neighboring community like Douglas County. So as we try to do efficiencies, that's something that needs to be considered as well. So this is the turnover rate, Commissioner, that you had asked about. The considerations of the 5-year plan, still with not addressing economic conditions. Turnover rates are increasing. You can see these look like small percentage amounts, but when you actually apply them to the FTE counts throughout the county, this is pretty significant. You can see from 9.5%, we had a big jump in 2011. We continue to jump up, a big jump between 2014 and 25 when we really started seeing the economy and the recovery. And this 13.8% number, that's only through October. So that will most certainly land quite a bit greater once we get through the end of the year and once we get, and I think it might be through October 1st as well. So we've got a few more months to add into that. So these are all very real issues as we're trying to do our operations throughout the county that we take into consideration. So that's everything with the adjustment from minimum to midpoint. The cost of living and pay for performance, in order to retain high-performing employees, we also need to award those high performers through either a pay for performance and provide a cost of a living adjustment so we do not slip further behind. So to give you an idea, many of these folks that we are competing with right now, we are still trying to dig out of the inequity hole through the adjustment from minimum to midpoint. But while we're doing that, our peers and folks that we're losing employees to, this is what they are projecting to do just for next year, 2018, which I believe, based on the information we received, is just a cost of living. So it's averaging about 3.1 for all these agencies, cost of living, and we're still trying to dig out from 2008. So as they continue to do this, again, we continue to slip further behind. So really, Commissioners, in summary, when we establish the financial roadmap, through the establishment of that, we know that it promotes collaboration throughout the entire county. Instead of having all the different agencies and entities come forward with their specific personnel inequities, we have worked together to develop a plan to address it systematically, county-wide, so that we can provide as much fairness as we can through the process. We know that the financial roadmap to date has provided a very clear direction for our citizens, and I believe that really, and we know it's also improved our bond rating based on advising the bond raters and everybody what direction we anticipate going. But we believe, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, this really enhances the citizen confidence because they know where we're going, they know where we anticipate expending the funds. And really, our fiscal management, I believe, is better than it has ever been here in El Paso County, and we saw that, through strong support of the initiatives at the polls. So this presentation is really just we want to identify an effective strategy to invest in human capital. It's like everything else, we can only ignore it so long we have to continue to invest and try to catch up as best we can. And it is important to maintain the strategy that we set in place. And I'd really kind of stated at the beginning of this, you will see when we get to Thursday, because I don't have numbers here, you'll see the options that we have in front of you, where we have some options to adjust, to continue to adjust from minimum to midpoint, to do either a pay for performance, a cost of living, to kind of multi-tier this, and then the item that we're primarily hearing is also to continue to invest in our infrastructure and in our roads, which is really what we know is something significant, that another item that we have neglected that we need to invest in. And you'll see that we can do, again, all of the above. So the difference really between the adjustment of from minimum to midpoint and the across the board is obviously, if you have a budget at X amount, a personnel budget, and we provide a 2%, then we add 2% of that personnel budget into that specific budget line item. And that's either done as an across the board or on a pay for performance, weighted at the discretion of the departments and the offices. And that is an across the board if we just do a 2% pay for performance or COLA. If we do an adjustment from minimum to midpoint, we actually target specifically those positions that will go, that are greater behind the midpoint than others. So it wouldn't be an even weighted average, and I kind of spoke to this earlier. So for example, if the DA's positions are 13% below, and the assessors are 2% below, obviously the DA is going to get a greater weighted adjustment through that, but it starts to even the playing field for all those employees that are more behind. And so that's really what we're looking at with that. Our financial roadmap will develop a strategy to get us there, to continue to get us there within 5 years, but to also try to address some of these other cost of living. It's a lot of information. I don't know if I've...
We were...
Take a breath in 35 minutes.
You know, I need some water. Thank you.
We were impressed. Questions now. Commissioner Gonzalez.
Thank you, Mr. President. So on the previous roadmap, I mean, this is the second year, was this year's recommendation 3%, 4% for 2018?
2.5. It equated to a 2% across the board, but it was never intended as an across the board.
Okay, so but across the board, it would have been a 2%.
Right.
Okay.
So what we did, Commissioner, and when we started this actually in 2016, we thought we were going to get there in 4 years, and then some of the projections changed, and we had to stretch it out to 5 years. And then when we went through that roadmap, we said, this is what we can afford to do. This is how much we can afford to do here. This is how much then this year and that year. And then we were asked by the commission and by the directors and offices to say, but what does that equate to in terms of a percentage? But it was never intended to be an across-the-board percentage through all of those years. It was just, it was an amount and what the financial roadmap could afford. Okay. What we'll see next Thursday is based on what we're looking at and a strategy behind investing in all of these, in all of these priorities is a more effective way or a more even way to get us there over the next 5 years, and also reinvest in the infrastructure that we
Okay, so because on a previous slide, okay, so 2% across the board would have been 1.6 last year, so would have been.
I think that was roughly what it equates to.
It would be just a little over that this year. 4% would be, 3.3 million probably. So I just looking at the annual budget, that's the 1.6 would be about 0.5% of the budget, and
I do not have a calculator. I will not attempt to do that equation up here.
I did it, so the 4%
if you say
would have been
so.
about 1%. So okay, I mean, I just. Yeah, so it's about 1.6 is what the roadmap says if we stuck to the 2%, but different options on how to spend that.
Right, and so what you'll see is some different options moving forward, because that roadmap also shows you have additional funds left over at the end of the year, and so how we expend those funds and reinvest in all of that. So,
okay. Commissioner Vanderwerf.
Thank you, Mr. President. The turnover rates, are those both voluntary and involuntary?
They are.
Okay, thank you.
And in fact, Commissioner, we took out, we had to take out because it was older data. We had to take out prior to 2010 because it looked like our turnover rates were significantly higher 2006 through 2009, but that was because of all the layoffs that the 300 employees that we had to do. So we actually took those out of the chart because it looked skewed because we didn't have the detail to split it into voluntary and involuntary. That made those numbers, but that was not as a result of employees leaving voluntarily. That was because we had so many layoffs during that time frame. So we felt it skewed the data.
I don't know if, at least maybe in the recent years, say 15 and 16, if there's a number that you can provide that would be just voluntary departures, people that decide to leave on their own. The previous years, I can understand the complications of that, but maybe in recent years.
Absolutely.
Maybe we could, get those numbers. Thanks.
Great. Any other questions? Okay.
Thank you very much.
Commissioner Littleton.
I do one question. I think it would be beneficial for the new commissioners to actually go into a little bit more data on what, some of those initial numbers were for the 5-year projection for each one of the different departments, or offices.
Right.
So,
and so
because I think that'll give them a better idea and picture of what we went through to come to the conclusions that we did back then.
Right. So we have the spreadsheet where we can show what we had to adjust, how many were that much below minimum, and then what was done through the adjustment from minimum to midpoint so far. And then we know we ran a most recent spreadsheet just based on, I think it's like the October 9th payroll, that showed based on this is how many people are still below midpoint and aggregately what that amount looks like, but specifically by department. And Mr. May kind of alluded to his detailed spreadsheet that he had with individual employees. We have all of that and to drill down into that. But we have a summary as well. And then to accompany the financial roadmap, we also have a spreadsheet that shows what that would look like for each department and office over the next several years. Because you've got a couple things that happen. You're not, as your deficit, and don't want to say this backward, but as you get closer to midpoint, you have more employees that are probably closer to midpoint, so that dollar doesn't stretch as far. Does that make sense? You probably got more employees that are 10% below or under midpoint than you do 20% under midpoint. So in those early years, you address a fewer number of employees, but you cover that gap more quickly, right? That adjustment is greater for those specific employees, and then it starts to slow down a little bit the closer you get to midpoint.
Okay.
If that makes sense. Did I say it right?
We believe.
Wow, don't go at 2 o'clock after lunch, huh?
All right.
All right, thank you.
We'll stand in recess till he gets here.
Sounds great. Oh,
is
he's
he?
here.
Oh, great.
Send him on down.
Parachute him in.
And Mr. President, Amy Folsom County Attorney, briefly, while Mr. Martindale makes his way to the podium, I've been asked to remind you and certainly answer any questions about the fact that the Public Health Department is itself a separate legal entity. I think that goes without saying, but if there are any questions related to that relationship, I'm happy to answer them.
And so the general fund does provide support to the health department, but it is not, when you see that line item in your budget, it is only the county support. It is not the health department's budget in its entirety, which those of you who serve on the health department obviously know that.
Okay. Great.
Good afternoon, Commissioners.
Good afternoon.
How are you doing?
Great.
I never thought that budget presentations would be under schedule, but and I didn't even get a speeding ticket, so that's good. Thank you very much, Dan Martindale, Public Health Director. Thank you for the opportunity to give you a quick overview of our health department here in El Paso County and our numbers that we're looking at for our 2018 budget. So again, thank you. Let me see if I can run this. There we go. All right, so on page 2, you see our organizational chart. We have 3 main divisions that you can see there, hopefully. Our Health Services Division, I don't think I need to go through every single box under the divisions. Environmental Health, and then Disease Prevention and Health Promotion. In just a moment, I want to talk a little bit more about our development of strategic initiatives activities as well. Just want to give you a broad overview here of kind of how our health department works in terms of the National Public Health Network. As you can see up at the top, we have the Centers for Disease Control, from which many of our grants come from in terms of pass-through dollars from the state health department down to local public health. And then you see that we have as I mentioned, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment that we work closely with in many facets of what we do here at a local level. And then, of course, we have El Paso County Public Health that we work hard here for our citizens, keeping them safe and hopefully healthy. Very quickly, under administration, as you know, operations liaison with county contracted services. 4 or 5 years ago, we integrated with El Paso County to do services in the 3 main areas of finance and budget, information technology, and Human Resources. And that has been going very well, and we're very pleased that we've built strong relationships with those three departments at El Paso County. Public Health Information Office is also under administration. Whenever there's an outbreak or news that the community needs to be aware of from a public health perspective, we've got 3 staff folks that within our Public Information Office that make sure there's clear and concise communication to the public. Grants and contracts, and again, this falls under what I had just mentioned, the strategic initiatives and development program that we do have. We've been very successful, I would say, over the last 2 to 3 years in really identifying some grants and additional contracts to somewhat keep us in pace with the demands here in El Paso County, from emerging public health issues to environmental health, behavioral health issues that we all are aware of, the opioid issue too that we're facing here locally. So we're very pleased that we've been very successful. We were able to hire a very highly qualified grant writer for that position. It's been paying great dividends for us over the last 2 to 3 years. Community partnerships and interdepartmental collaboration, again, that falls under the strategic initiatives activities that we do and the staff that handle that. Policies and medical oversight, I think you're aware that we also have a medical director that we work with that is there to answer any medical questions, whether it be within our clinic setting, within our communicable disease and tuberculosis program, and all others throughout the health department. Accreditation, I always like to mention that we were the first health department in the state of Colorado that was accredited. We're actually coming up on our 5th year, so we have to go the second round now and reapply for accreditation. We finally, after about 5 years actually, were recognized and were given a grant because we were accredited. So that's very positive, I think, and hopefully that'll continue. It's taken a while, but we keep pushing the fact that, yes, we are accredited. We went through a 2.5-year process to do so, and now hopefully it's finally starting to pay some dividends for us. Moving on to, whoops, I'm just way behind here. There we go. So our main divisions, environmental health, I think all of you at one point or another have been involved with us and working alongside us with some of the issues over the last year or so. As you can see, and I don't think I need to read through all of them, but activities include plan review, air quality, body art. Retail food safety is a big one. Currently, we have 2,683 retail food establishments here in El Paso County. That's grown over the last couple of years, because I remember 2 years ago, we were right at about 2,450. So this has grown tremendously. This is, talking from a budget perspective, this is spreading us pretty thin. That in conjunction with the fact that because our economy is getting stronger, there's more building permits, there's more building going on, people needing septic systems, and we inspect those as well. So that can really make us thin in terms of environmental health. That coupled with if there's an emergency preparedness issue that all staff have to be involved in, and then we run into continuity of operations issues. How do we continue our daily operations while we're handling all these other things that are coming down the pipe? I also wanted to mention too, since we're on retail food safety, the good old state health department, for every food inspection or restaurant inspection we do, we have to turn back $40 per inspection to the state health department, and that equates to about $101,000 a year. And I suspect that that is to support their state environmental health programs. Land use planning, et cetera, et cetera. Health services, as you can see, immunization, travel clinics, family planning clinic, nurse-family partnership. We have nurse-family partnership and healthy children and families. Those are two nurse home visitation programs where we actually have nurses go out to the family, making sure that quality nutrition is being given to the children by the families, making sure there's no abuse issues, perhaps, making sure that the children are thriving in the home. The Healthy Children and Families program is actually in conjunction with our Department of Human Services. They actually are the ones that are supporting this from a funding standpoint. This is a relatively new program. We've had it for about a year now. This too is a caseworker goes out with one of our nurses to the home to make sure that the children are thriving, that they're getting proper nutrition, do they have any health issues, et cetera. So this has been very successful so far in the first year. And then of course we have our Women, Infant, and Children Supplemental Nutrition Program. And currently we have pushing about 15,000 clients now in our WIC program. Health promotion and disease prevention. Again, I won't go through every one of these, but under this, we have a very active communicable disease program. We are generally involved with 24/7 investigations. Here's where our epidemiologists also reside. Within this program, we also have our tuberculosis clinic program. We have a Communities That Care, which is another new grant that we received about a year ago down in the Fountain area that deals with youth substance abuse, education, prevention, including alcohol as well. And I think most of you are aware that we've had a long-running tobacco education prevention partnership that is a successful program that we've had. Well, it's actually where I started back in 1995, so we've had a long time. Maternal child health, so we talk about early childhood obesity, references in regard to children with special health needs, and then we, in general, promote connectedness, resiliency, and life skills for youth. And then we have our child fatality review team that we've had now for at least 6 or 7 years. In the picture, in the picture you see Dr. Kelly with the coroner's office. He's one of the main members of the child fatality review team. Out of this came the teen suicide prevention program that we've had now for a good year or so. We also talk about youth health and development. Really what the child fatality review team is supposed to do, and are doing it very well, is to look at what the causes of deaths among children are, and then really come up with a plan and a strategy, working with several community partners on how to prevent those from happening again, or at least to the degree that they already are. So that has been a successful program as well. And once again, I wanted to mention development strategic initiatives. Again, although this is not a specific division, this is where we've hired a couple staff that are able to really focus on identifying grants that are available, contracts that are available, partnership development. Some of you are aware of the RISE grant that we got from El Pomar for the southeast neighborhoods in Colorado Springs, and then public health planning. So we were able to hire, because of these grants, 2 planners that we're working with right now. One focuses on the built environment, so especially in those neighborhoods that have individuals that are struggling, low socioeconomic issues that they may have. Talking about walkability in neighborhoods, talking about transportation, talking about access to health care, food deserts, for example, good nutrition, et cetera, et cetera. So we're very pleased that through the grant process, we were able to secure funds for these. Okay, and so in mentioning the Southeast neighborhood, we're talking about our new building that we are collaborating in the usage of that building with Harrison School District 2. This is located at 2948 East Fountain Boulevard. So you can see that we do have another WIC clinic down south in Widefield. Obviously, we're at the Citizen Service Center, and then our new building that we hope to have a ribbon cutting, and hopefully you will attend, either the latter part probably of January or the first part of February. And I would like to say that about 33% of the eligible WIC clients that we have here in El Paso County actually reside in that area. So overall, it's going to be an additional WIC clinic. However, it'll be a family meeting, or not a family meeting, a partner meeting area where meetings and those sorts of things can take place. Also, we can do outreach in terms of childhood immunizations or other types of public health activities to make it accessible to those folks that live down that area that perhaps don't have proper transportation. Okay, so without going through all of these, so local public health departments in the state of Colorado operate under Colorado Revised Statute 25-1520. This was revised in 2008. The main things that came out of the revision were the fact that we now, all local public health organizations need to complete a community health assessment, and we need to do this to make sure that we're addressing the needs as time progresses. As we all know, the needs do change over time. Create a county public health plan, and this happens every 5 years. Skipping down to the last check, talking about what the core public health services are in terms of assessment, planning, and communication. I've talked a little bit about that. Obviously, public health departments need to have a vital records and statistics program. CD, communicable disease, as I've mentioned, to investigate disease outbreaks, et cetera, and prevent disease outbreaks. Prevention, population health promotion, which are like tobacco education prevention, teen suicide prevention, et cetera, et cetera. Emergency preparedness and response, which I think is pretty self-explanatory, and then environmental health, which I've also touched briefly upon. Strategic plan goals moving forward. We're trying to integrate those that are also within the county strategic goals that I believe a report was, or third quarter report was just given last week probably. But we talk about workforce development, how we maintain, first of all, recruit highly skilled staff, but also maintain them over the years so we don't lose them to other entities either here or out of state. So that has been a problem in the past. I think we're gaining ground on that one. Technology, obviously. Communication, better communication with the public, better internal communication with staff and other departments within El Paso County. Continue to increase and build upon community partnerships. Funding for agency and community partners. We've realized since about 2008 that if we're going to do our jobs, we really need the partnerships of those that have similar goals and objectives that we do in terms of public health, because we are a lean machine. Back in 2008, I want to say we had over 200 staff. Right now we have 144. That's not necessarily a bad thing entirely. It's made us become more efficient, but there's a point where we're going to need to take a look at that. And then community health improvement plan, which we're currently working on. Obviously, mental health and behavioral health, substance use, which I just briefly mentioned. Those are issues that, especially behavioral health, which has not been a traditional topic for a program within the health department, but it is now. And moving forward, I would hope that we can come up with some funds in terms of really working on that area. Obviously, we right now have one component of that, which is the teen suicide prevention program. And then healthy eating and active living. Again, I mentioned that in terms of the built environment. So, all right, very quickly. Our revenue, as you can see, our budget in our revenue is probably somewhat different than most other El Paso County departments, whereas 73% of our funds come from grants, contracts, licenses, and fees. You can see that El Paso County's contribution to public health is about $3.3 million. So projected revenue for 2018 is right at about $16 million. Expenditures, again, it's no surprise when you have a education and prevention type organization where we're out in the community, we're out in the field, et cetera. The main cost is for personnel, and as you can see, personnel expense for 2018, we're projecting about 73% of our overall expenditures. I think you can see the other slices of the pie there that I don't believe I need to go into unless you'd like me to. Okay, so budgetary challenges. We gave a good deal of thought to this. For me, it's the first one, carrying out emergency response plans for large disease outbreaks. Currently, we have 17 closed points of dispensing, which means we've been working with other organizations such as USAA, Colorado College, the Air Force Academy. So, should there be a need to prophylax or vaccinate 350, 400,000 people, they could actually do it for their employees where they work. So we would not necessarily have to worry about that as a health department. We would get them the medication, the antibiotic, whatever the situation may require. And then we also have 15 open pods, which is for the general public to come to. In running our exercises, and several years ago we did H1N1, so putting our figures together, if we move forward and something hopefully doesn't happen that's bad, but if it did, let's just use anthrax as an example. If we had to prophylax, give antibiotics to 300, 400,000 people, and this is a situation where people would have to come back for a second dose, and then we'd get it down to which ones of these 300, 400,000 people were exposed. They would have to come back and get an additional 10-day supply of the antibiotic. We are anticipating that if that would happen, we would need about 900 more individuals to staff those pods to make that run like it needs to run. And that doesn't even include the 144 staff that we have. So I think that's something to really think about. Hopefully it doesn't happen, but then again, this day and age, we never know. And then animal to human disease investigations, that has, for whatever reason, increased quite a bit. So when you're talking about rabies, tularemia, plague, those sorts of diseases, we've just seen an uptick in those sorts of diseases. And again, this can pull away from staff. So if we have a couple rabid dogs or pets like that need to be quarantined, we have to go and make sure that those dogs are, and the dog's owners, for example, are following the directives that are set forth. They need to be in a double fence backyard, for example. They're not to be accessing any human beings, for example. We have to go out and make sure that is actually taking place. Again, that takes away from the time that we need to be doing restaurant inspections, pool inspections, body art inspections, et cetera, et cetera. So that's another challenge that we have moving forward. Social determinants of health and influence on health outcomes. Very briefly, I think we've touched on this in terms of what we're doing in Southeast Colorado Springs, but when we're talking about social determinants of health, we're talking about education levels of individuals, access to health care, housing, all those sorts of things. And if you don't have those things, you know, it's pretty tough to pay attention to your individual health and those sorts of things. So we're making a little progress, but I think hopefully in the future, in the not too distant future, we can recognize perhaps some additional funding to do that. Obviously, when those things aren't happening, when people don't have access to health care, housing, et cetera, it just overburdens all the other organizations that work with lower socioeconomic folks. So it's kind of like we can pay and hopefully do something now, or we can pay a whole lot more later. So anyway, uncertainty in federal funding allocations for public health core activities. Obviously, this is at the federal level. I have no clue from day to day what's going to transpire for the Health and Prevention Fund from the federal government, which actually would then go from them to CDC in most cases, State Health Department, then back to us. That is something that I worry about quite a bit as well. And how is that going to look? Are they going to pay Peter to pay Paul once they get the whole insurance, health insurance situation figured out? And then, just to let you know, as I mentioned, 73% of our revenue is non-discretionary. And so grants, contracts, they are given to us for a specific purpose. In other words, if we need staff in another program, we can't use that money to put staff in that other program. It has to be for specifically tobacco education and prevention. It has to be specifically for teen suicide prevention, those sorts of things. So I think that's key to know. Obviously, about 22% of our revenue comes from fees and license fees, et cetera, for environmental health inspections. But that goes back into the program, and like I mentioned, we have to turn right around in terms of the retail food establishment and give $100,000 back to the State Health Department. So with that said, budgetary highlights, we're almost done. So, First Accredited Health Department, already mentioned that. We were able to work with Harrison School District 2 for $1 a year lease, so that's pretty cheap. And then the RISE Coalition, which actually we received word on that grant a year ago last month, and we're moving forward with that. Again, this is in terms of the social determinants of health that we're working on in Southeast Colorado Springs. The new WIC office, which I also mentioned, we're real anxious to get that open. Third-party payer model. So for the last couple of years, and before then it was, yeah, come on up, get your immunization. If you're not able to pay, we have a sliding fee scale, et cetera, et cetera. But now we've set up a system, thankfully, where we can actually take insurance. The organization probably should have been doing that years ago, but now we are able to take some of the different insurances, so if people have insurance, we can get the full reimbursement for what they're asking for. We've got a ways to go on this, and it is quite a process to get approval from an insurance company to have you as a vendor, as you probably know. So it does take some time, but we're making progress with that. We've seen increased vaccination rates, which from a public health perspective, that is very, very positive. I think one of the reasons for that is because on Tuesdays, we started about 7 months ago, where any Tuesday people can come in without an appointment. So that has been very successful. And then we actually do a lot of outreach. So just like I mentioned, the Southeast building that's new, we'll be able to go out there and do outreach where people don't have to come all the way up to Citizen Service Center, but they can in some cases, walk to the office when we're having clinics out there and get their immunization. We've also gone to schools right around the opening of school for childhood immunization vaccinations, so they don't have to come all the way to the health department if they don't live close to the Citizen Service Center. So I think that has been a real big asset for the folks with us actually doing the outreach. Okay, so finally, you can see the base budget here that we've been working on going from 2016 to 2018. The only comment that I really want to make on this is that first line item, which is El Paso County. Again, going back to about 2008, before the recession, the county was giving us about $5.2 million. Back then, the population was 600,000, just over 600,000. As you know, it's been growing by leaps and bounds. I think in 2018, it's supposed to be close to 680 or maybe even a little bit more. So we took that $2 million cut over a 2-year period, and it was never put back into the budget. But when you look at the increase in population and the emerging public health issues, I'm not saying that we would like to entertain conversation for 2018 necessarily about additional funding from the county, but certainly I would say I'd like to plant that seed for 2019. So with that said, I'd also like to go down to the total expenditures. So you see under 2017 and 2018, we have $485,266. That is actually money that's going to be coming out of reserve. It's already been approved by the Board of Health. That $485,000 was for the purchase of 3 vehicles, which we've already purchased for folks to be able to use in the terrain that we have and all the field work that we do, and especially when there's bad weather and the vehicles have been a hit. So that was about $85,000. Also, the building in Southeast Colorado Springs, they approved taking out $250,000 from our reserve to make the needed changes to that building and bring a few things up to code. We've negotiated some things with Harrison School District 2, and I think that will be coming to fruition here very shortly, as I mentioned. And then the other was $150,000, which is part of that $485,000 for finally an electronic public health record system to track clients, to communicate with other healthcare providers, et cetera, in regard to patients that we see and they see. So there's not duplication of efforts and those sorts of things that I believe you're aware of. The only reason that we put $150,000 under 2018 is because we're not quite sure that we're going to be able to have the contract in hand for the electronic medical record system. So although that's part of the 485, if we aren't able to do that, that expense will simply be accounted for in 2018, and then we would use that $150,000 that is part of the 485 to pay for that in 2018, making it a balanced budget. So with that, I will entertain any questions.
Okay, questions? Commissioner Vanderwerth.
Thank you for the presentation. And there was just a comment that you made, under the unlikely, unfortunate experience of having some kind of disease outbreak or something. You talked about the possibility of needing as many as 900 people to help dispense the virus. Or the injections and so forth. So my question for you is, do you have a plan in place for that, or is there an interconnection with OEM on that?
Yeah, there is. And when I say 900, I mean, I'm not talking we need 900 more staff, obviously. Yeah. We work with, for example, the Medical Reserve Corps. So they have been exercised when we do our exercises. They would be ready to go, but we would still need many more volunteers and/or staff to do that. When needed, we would probably call on other local public health organizations to send staff down. But no matter how well you plan, if we're talking 400,000 individuals that might need to be prophylaxed, we would need all of those 900 people. Now, and again, it's not just, as you know, it's not just the giving of the vaccination, but there's safety, security, you name it, that's all involved in one pod. And you multiply that by the 15 open pods, that's what we're estimating that we would need.
So you've got some kind of a plan in place to, if not fully address that, at least partially address that?
Yes.
You feel like you could extend beyond that and get there? Okay.
Absolutely, and that's why we're continuing to work on getting more of those closed pods so that we wouldn't have to utilize our resources should something terribly happen. They could actually stay in their building and actually distribute the vaccination to their employees, especially the large employers here in our county.
All right, thanks.
Okay. Any other questions? Wow.
Wow.
You can make comments. You can if you want.
Well, I would just say, based on math, if your budget were to increase just about $100,000, that would be just over 3% of that budget. So just a general comment.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Wow. Well, fantastic. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're done.
Almost.
Commissioners, we will be back in front of you next Tuesday. Same channel, same station. What's that? On Tuesday, we will, you do have a couple items on Tuesday's agenda. I believe the anticipation is those will be short, but we do have a statutory requirement to get those on the agenda for next week. So we have a start time of 10:30. Would you like to keep your binders there or give them to us so that then we can add the presentations, or give them to you to put in at the beginning of the next meeting? We can collect those. We do, but some of you might want to review them. It's up to you, but we need to get you the presentations for next week in there.
Well, it'll be here if you want to stick it in here. Yeah.
Fabulous.
I'm going to hold on to mine, but you do need to make additions, like you said. So if you could just put those on my desk, I'll add them in.
Absolutely.
I've got notes in here that I want to review.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you.